But it was really sweet to hear Anna Marie this morning how she is supported by her husband and stuff. As much as my husband is supporter, he's like anti tech. So there you have it.
Well, he does think I have a little bit of a crack-like addiction to tech news around the world in the mornings, but otherwise he's supportive.
It's a good thing. Tyler, we are at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
And before you start, can you check the hand raise first?
Air horn.
I got
Yeah,
more.
air horn,
I have more important things to do, and I will get to those shortly.
Sure. Oh yes, Twitter. Drink
Do you
some
want
water.
us? He
Clear your
wants us to
throat.
chit chat,
Yeah,
to
get
feel
ready.
to fill the void until he's ready.
Yeah. Drink some water, clear your voice, get ready for recording, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's see what's going on here. Okay.
Raise your hand up in the air.
Let's see what. Can somebody go to the Tech News Twitter account and tell me if there's the stream as the top tweet? I believe it is.
Okay. I hope it is too.
No, it's not working, Tyler. The stream is
No.
broken.
It is for me.
Pin it?
I don't see it.
I see it.
I see it.
You do?
The tweet is there, but it's not streaming. It looks like it's
working
broken.
for me.
It's a link. It's a link to the stream.
Yeah, it's a link to the stream. Exactly. Yeah, it's working.
It is not displaying as usual.
Right.
Yeah, but I saw it like the other day without even clicking on it. As soon as I see it, like that one, it just keeps on going with the stream. But this one, you have to click on it and get to the link. Yeah.
Yep. You have to click on it, then it works. If not, it's just a...
Yeah, I don't know why it's not
I don't see it, Tyler.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Where's Pierre? Because that's his gig. He might be sleeping.
Pierre was in our room just now. Let me pin him.
Thank you.
Okay, I pinned.
Okay, let's give this a shot. Welcome back, everybody. Happy Friday. Hold on. Sorry for the turbulence. This is your captain speaking.
Yeah.
We're going to circle the airport one more time and try and make a landing here.
Oh.
Okay. So, here we go. Hold on tight. Please put your tray in the upright position. I could make that would be a nice audio recording.
Kato is here. Kato-san.
Yeah.
British Kato-san.
Invite shimashita yo.
Arigato.
So, yeah, that would be great if I could find like a captain and make like a captain sounding recording. We could do a whole big airplane metaphor. And Cheryl will be coming around to collect your garbage and helping you prepare for landing.
No.
Don't give her any hassle because she will,
No, we do it the Japanese way. Please keep in your bag and bring it home and trash.
Yeah. By the way, Japanese stewardesses are the best. So,
wait a minute. I just had a very quick question. Sorry, Tyler.
Yeah.
So it's a live stream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but why is it's like delayed by a bit? Like right now, I don't hear you what you are saying. I'm hearing what you said about 3 minutes ago. Well,
yes.
2 minutes.
And, that's how internet streaming works. It's delayed.
To collect your garbage and,
thanks. If you could mute it so that we don't hear it, that would be nice.
Okay. Yes, yeah, it is.
By the way, this is actually Twitter's biggest problem at the moment, I think, which is the way that they built their copy of Clubhouse is that the people on stage are in a chat together, but the people in the audience are listening to a live stream delayed. Just like, most web live streams. When you're watching a YouTube live stream, you're actually watching it's 20 seconds behind the actual live event. And here in Clubhouse, the people on stage and the people in the audience, there's basically no delay. That's why when I accept somebody to jump up on stage, they join the conversation like there was no break between the future and the past. It's like we're all listening together. And in that, this is, I think, Twitter's biggest problem is the way they've engineered it is the people listening in the audience are actually listening to a 20, actually we timed it. It was like a 9-second delayed live stream.
Yep, 8-9 seconds, yes.
Right. And so when somebody from the audience tries to join on stage as a speaker, they have to wait 9 seconds to catch up to the future that the people in the stage are in.
Do you think that's because of the way that they're recording and transcribing the audio?
Yes. Well, it's that, and because they've engineered it for unlimited room sizes, which to do that, you have to have this kind of like webcast, like when we watch, anyone watches a YouTube live stream or any internet live stream, there's always a, 5 to 20 second delay. And so imagine you're watching a live stream that's 20 seconds delayed, and then they invite you to join as one of the speakers in the actual source of the stream, which is 20 seconds in the future. Well, how's that going to work? It's going to force you to go 20 seconds into the future. So it's going to, everyone has to wait, for you to transport into the real future, not the delayed future, the delayed video. So that's a weird engineering problem that they're going to have to deal with. Which I don't know, that it's weird. It's really weird.
You need to start charging people for subscriptions because you're saying that now this is future tech news around the world.
Yeah. Right.
Even more valuable.
So, well, by the way, stock trading platforms do that. If you want to, have a real actual split second trading execution, because 20 seconds on a stock trade is a BFD, a big fucking deal in the stock world. So, yeah,
one of the oldest games, real time game. It's
been
around. That's what Bloomberg. That's what got him to get the big B.
Yeah. So here we go back into the future. Friday, October 8th. 2021. So here we go. The top story at this moment is from Axios that Google and YouTube say they will prohibit ads and monetization on content that denies climate change starting next month, in the future, a month in the future. And the question is, there's a few questions. Why do that? Number two, why announce it today when Google announced 4 other Google projects that have green initiatives yesterday, like Google Travel and Google, what was the other one? Google Maps. When you travel somewhere, it tells you the most fuel efficient way to get there. We read the headlines yesterday of 4 new Google products and all of their kind of green-minded initiatives. And this is obviously another one for YouTube, but kind of, I guess they felt like it was different enough that they had to make it as a separate announcement. But
I think it's leadership on the green front when you collect them all together. But the issue that we've seen with COVID and then with the climate deniers is that the behavioral science is kind of in the driver's seat, right, of those other 2 sciences. So it's a great effort that needs to be applauded to kind of get on the front end as we get out of COVID to get on this next big, humanity is problem for humanity. So I think it's awesome. It's green leadership. It'll be a little fraught with whatever, but at least trying to get out there in front of misinformation is great.
Yes, but let's have a healthy debate. Here's what I'm not certain, although I'm willing to be convinced, that policing speech is the best way to affect social changes. I agree. We would love to see, me personally, I would love to see a world where everyone accepts the science around climate change, that it's a problem, that it's human derived, yada, yada, yada. I'm not convinced that I should say I'm concerned that using web platforms making strong policies that where people feel like they're being silenced actually exacerbates their tendency to resist joining the other side, so to speak.
Is it silencing? Is it imposing a negative on a person, or is it the removal of a positive? As in, it's not punishing an individual for having a certain set of views. You're not imposing a handicap on them. What you're doing is you're removing a positive, which everybody takes for granted.
And I agree with that. But here's my point: is I'm using the word they kindly here. I have friends who deny, kind of would call themselves kind of in the, science challenger. My point is if our objective is to get everyone into the same boat, which is a challenge, because you have some people who are just contrarians by nature. And certainly that seems to be part of what's going on here is people don't like having an authority force them into a boat. And how to do we're in this really peculiar social stage of things where if the fact that Google's doing this is likely to be taken as a strong signal let's just be very clear. I'll speak very clearly. Tucker Carlson each night, I can almost predict that Tucker's going to use this in his nightly broadcast as a lever to even further entrench and solidify the anti-tech, that the narrative, in creating the narrative that big tech is against the conservatives who challenge the narrative creators, be they big media or big tech or big government, are working against you. And so that's what concerns me, actually, is that how this will be used in that cohort and how it will be used against itself in a kind of jujitsu move or judo move.
Well, in Grand Experiment number 2, we learned a lot with Grand Experiment a la COVID, number 1, about having this notion about free speech, right? Because it's not free speech; it's a private company making its own rules.
Right.
So the question is it really a question? Because that is exactly the positioning that people use with Facebook and things like, hey, it's a free speech issue, and it's not, full stop, right? So if you want to go, remember back in the day, Tyler, we watched ABC, NBC, CBS, and then what was that local cable channel, right? And people could go to that local cable channel where 5 people were watching TV, and they can spout anything they want, So it's kind of, I think of it as a corporate responsibility avenue. And yes, there's in fact, quite specifically, Tucker's going to he's going to maintain his business interests. Let's be really frank about it, right? You said conservative, but I'm not sure that on this topic, there's a lot of conservative people that are on the, hey, what can we do? Many people will want to get in the weeds with regards to what is the science. The science, in fact, is still evolving. But it's Grand Experiment number 2. And he can whine all he wants to some of us, too. So,
even on the topic of free speech, like, for instance, technically free speech, it should come with no amendments and whatnot. I'm currently sat outside of a school, and on the premise of free speech, I should be able to say as I want to and whatever batshit insane things I want to, but I can't do that because society has put limitations on it, because the harm that I could potentially do to those that would hear outweighs my right to free speech to society sort of, imposes limitations, and rightly so. So I think as a society we can agree that we don't necessarily want this kind of content on platforms that are private, companies like YouTube, because the harm that it does actually outweighs the rights of those for, air quotes, free speech. But I agree with your point, Tyler, that it gives ammunition. Say, look, we're being censored. But I don't think the intention here is to appease or to change the minds of those who have already decided on this topic, as in those who would go searching for the content.
Yes.
I think it's those that are in the middle ground, those that are thinking about it, not thinking about it, who would be swayed, sort of those swing vote opinion people who would become part of that group. That's what this is to stop. Because if you're already there and you're already looking for that kind of content, you're already lost.
So check this out. So I'm looking at the most popular tweets about this link of this Axios article. And the most popular links are, one is from Rita Pahini with hundreds of retweets, which says, the same big tech monopolies that suppressed lab leak theory and Biden file stories now want to determine what's climate denial content. That's from Rita Panini. The next is from Bridget Patassi that says, the same people who were saying that Facebook needs to be censored yesterday are today making the argument that Google and YouTube can do what they want because it's a free market. Just admit that you think anyone who disagrees with you should be censored no matter how it happens. The next is from I've started two of about 12 who all make similar arguments about, you want to censor Facebook when you think they're doing something that you oppose, or this is already being weaponized in the way that I described that it likely will be.
Yeah, but Tyler, I mean, yes, I agree with you that this is going to be a lightning rod for people like Tucker Carlson. But then they're going to find something anyway. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
That's right.
You're better be damned if you do, right?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Our discussion yesterday about TikTok, I was wondering, what do you want to qualify as free speech as opposed to psychological warfare? I don't want to go there in detail or in depth, but it is a concept. I've been thinking about it since yesterday. There are biological warfare, people are weaponizing now this form of content used by TikTok, for example, to pollute the mind of your youth, for our future generation to not being able to think in a positive way, destructing their construct of consciousness. I'm thinking it's coming to the point that we must, establish some sort of definition, what comes under psychological warfare. And then from there, we can move into how to defend ourselves and develop policies around that. I mean, that's how I was thinking, because impacting someone's at a younger age, like the growing mind, in such a way that it kind of distorts their perception of reality and how they connect with their surrounding and community. That is, very concerning.
So, for example,
to me, the globalized world, globalization and how information is very quickly moving. Even I can see it from my very, very short life. Well, not short, but in my generation. When I was born in Ethiopia, my mom, who didn't even go to, high school dropout and had me very young, I can tell you she was getting us every single vaccination, because Africa kids' mortality was very big. So all our family, we had all of them, rabies and typhoid, tetanus, you name it, we had all that. And now I have been away for decades in Canada, and I came back, especially with COVID. All my family members are saying no to the COVID, the hesitation, because they are all like getting all this information and they are getting bombarded from what we just said, all of us, with the anti-vaccines, and they are saying, oh no, we heard this, we heard that. Whether they believe it or not, they just don't want to be taking a chance. So I think we do a lot of things for society and also not to pollute people's understanding, and has a life altering consequences. I see it here a lot, so we
But
have to. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
no, Messi, I was just going to say you nailed it. And I think the anti-vaccines plural isn't right. It's an anti-vaccine. So it's people that are anti taking the COVID vaccine are not anti any other vaccine. It's just that one vaccine that they're challenging.
Yeah, Cheryl, I already explained the reason why you didn't appear.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, and nobody has it on their calendar because I had to reset everything in Club Deck.
Okay.
So
I think in closing that spot at that point, the concept and what we're trying to do with free speech is great, but its execution is challenging as we're learning. And the same thing goes with this idea of the free market, right? Look at fossil fuels. So I mean, it's something that it's good for us to kind of take a step back on the speech stuff over the past few years and nudge it a little bit into a wiser trajectory, I would think.
The framers who framed the Constitution and wrote the First Amendment were working with a much less diverse society than we are working with now. And so we have many more different opinions that we have to deal with. And in fact, it's really difficult to figure out what is real in some of these exchanges of opinion. So this is extremely difficult to legislate or regulate or anything because nobody, nobody, so to speak, is in charge of the truth. It was bad when America was for white men who owned land, but the white men who owned land uh, sort of said what was true, and the rest of us, um, well, I wasn't there, but the rest of us just accepted it. We didn't question it. There is so much questioning now that it's hard to move forward.
I think also another equally, if not more important change in the diversity is anonymity, because people can spread disinformation, and it doesn't matter if people figure out that it's disinformation later, because it's not gonna, their reputation isn't an important consideration. I think ivermectin is a really, really good example.
yeah,
At the beginning, it looked like there could potentially be something there, and then there was some fraudulent information. It was being repeated over and over and over and over again. And people who wanted an alternative could seize on that, and the information could be repeated more and more. And it became truth by repetition rather than actual critical analysis and trials, and the real way we figure things out.
Tyler Pierre is in the room.
okay.
Dr. Francine provides a lot of great context when you look at just how this has changed. But one specific point about how truthful they were, that's quite debatable with the whole quote unquote history. But I do agree with your point that just when you pass around the microphone now with social media to literally anybody who can create an account, we have a much more perplexing problem now, where the power of some stories. I mean, we've got to do something because it has catastrophic effects to many people.
Well, it's the context of what we're talking about. Oh, sorry, go on, Miss.
No,
I was just going to
sorry,
add
Messi.
very quickly saying that even questioning science, questioning doctors, I mean, don't we all depend to have our heart surgery and other things? I mean, we do ask second opinion and things like that. But now it's just automatic that doctors are not, are not going to be trusted, or science shouldn't be trusted. It's just all this questioning and completely even destroying the credibility science is to me is worrisome.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. I mean, I don't know if it's true in all the countries that are represented here on stage and in the audience, but when I was a kid studying, they used to teach us something called civics classes, which was really about our responsibility in the community. So when we spoke, make sure it doesn't harm or cause panic or cause undue harm to others. Speak the truth, all of that stuff. My understanding, and I've seen it with my own kids as they were growing up, those classes are gone. I mean, they're not taught anymore. And therefore, you've got the masses who can just say what they want without ever having been trained or taught to do critical thinking or just thinking about the consequences of what they say and the impact it might have. And if that's the kind of audience we have there, then somewhere you need to put guardrails. And there's nothing wrong with Google or anyone else saying, we're not going to spread this because people are just not capable of doing critical thinking on their own. They just believe what they read or they hear or they say.
So
So
check.
I think it's changed. I don't know if that's true in all other countries.
This really requires some really basic functional science literacy. It's something that in science educations we talked a lot about and has not been actualized in a democratic world. If you don't have a basic functional scientific literacies, it's really, really hard if people who understands do not stand up and censor some of these misinformations. I'm not advocating censoring everybody. I think there's a limit of freedom of speech in a democratic world. Otherwise, we won't see a normal distributions. Majority of people probably have basic functional scientific literacy, but you still have a quarter of people who are very easily swayed by misinformations. This is Xing Qi. I'm done speaking.
Okay, thank you for that. So check
I'm
this out.
gonna push back.
Oh, hey, Donish, go ahead.
No, I was gonna push back on the last comment around censorship. I think we have to be very careful. A good example is, where is the line that we draw between public health and science, and where do we draw the line between politics? Easiest example to think about is the lab leak, right? Like, we made it into a scientific thing. We published a few papers, by the way, written by the same people that were actually trying to hide the lab leak. And while science is great in its pursuit, I think there's a lot of benefit that's coming. Francine was talking about a time when that information, we were told what was truth and what wasn't truth. You know what would have happened at that time had this lab leak been occurring? I think we can all guess. It would have been nice and quiet, and nobody would have known, and nobody would have been able to, address this for future cases. And that's why we had all these issues in society. And so,
Yeah, it's far
I'm
more
all for,
complex now.
yeah, I'm all for trying to come up with better systems of truth and ways of thinking about it. But I think that saying, hey, you know a lot, so you're an expert and, you should be able to speak, whereas this person shouldn't, I feel like that's a very slippery slope. And I just wanted to say that just because I know that we've addressed this quite a lot in this room, but I think we have to be very careful. That is a very bitter pill to swallow as a society, because it can be a very slippery slope.
So
This is Anshin Dusty.
I agree with you.
So check this out. There's a new breaking news headline coming out from The Information. They say Google search wants to curate big news. It could be a minefield. They say they have sources that Google's working on something called Big Moments, a search feature that contextualizes and highlights the most authoritative facts about major events in real time. Google's trying to learn a tough job. Google is trying to learn a tough job that news editors around the world do every day, curating information about breaking news. A small team inside Google's search organization has spent more than a year developing a search engine feature called Big Moments that takes a more active role in determining what information to show in search results about major news events, according to 3 people with direct knowledge of the work. The group has pursued the project as Google search has continually struggled to keep up with breaking news such as the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol and last year's Black Lives Matter protests. One of the people said the proposed feature aims to spotlight and provide more historical context about important events from health, crisis, and terrorism to entertainment and sporting events as they unfold. It would go beyond the types of news articles and tweets Google currently shows in its search results, obviously, by highlighting the most authoritative facts about a specific event in real time, such as death and injury counts, and updating them as new information emerges. Big Moments also could incorporate government data on the frequency of major events such as mass shootings or natural disasters. I just tweeted that out. Interesting. Because
I don't know how much I want Google curating and qualifying the news, right? I mean, the medium is the message, and I would be very wary. Let's say that there's something, some negative effect of something that they're doing. All of the stuff that happened with Facebook. Can you imagine if Facebook was the authority on what news is? You think all of that would have come out? I'm not sure how I feel about this.
So, by the way,
But hang on a second. They've been the censor of web content for 20 years. Full stop. Their algorithm. So let's not think for half a second that they haven't already been in the driver's seat of what we are fed when we do a quote unquote Google search. We are going to a very curated, based on the algorithm, a little spoonful of what they believe answers your query, right? So let's just understand that. But yeah, so it's already happening, I guess is the way I would put it.
Well, the school shooting that happened recently in Texas, there was a Clubhouse room made about that. And I get the sense that when big news is happening, people will go through their own proprietary blend of seeking out truth or information on the matter. And I suspect people who use Clubhouse regularly will feel like they have a bit of an advantage as an extra source that many people aren't aware with. The Twitter Space version of that, people already go to Twitter when there's they want to know things of what's going on, but that will probably be, people will go to a major news source like CNN.com or BBC.com, and then they might go to Twitter to try and find out what's going on. And if they still feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions, they might go to a social audio type feature like Twitter Spaces. And ideally, I meant Clubhouse. They would come to a room like Clubhouse, like we had here recently when there was the school shooting. There was a very popular room, or even Mosor when the Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp outage was happening. One of the biggest rooms Clubhouse has had in a very long time was that room. It got up to 8,000 people, practically full. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And it speaks to the power of the format of social audio, of people getting into a room, even more so if it was a very widely accepted app where experts of all kind, and this is what I'm very excited about, is the idea of a Clubhouse-like format, social audio, that the experts of all categories are also familiar with. And this is where I think Twitter Spaces can have a very asymmetrical advantage, being that there's all kinds of experts already on Twitter. And if that social audio format sticks, and I suspect it will, especially in those instances where people want to know what's really going on in real time, and these things happen rather frequently, do they not? Like the top news story of each day, whatever it might be, especially in political news, because there seems to never be a shortage of big political happenings. So that could be, to me, I think very, very interesting. And I think a social audio news gathering can be incredibly powerful once the experts themselves understand that that's a new way of news digestion.
Hey,
So,
Tyler, do you
yes.
think that they should have check marks in Clubhouse so we can know who is a quote unquote trusted
Right.
resource and
Yeah.
who isn't?
Well, you mean I verified? Well, they're already partnering with Stripe on their identity verification-ish things. I think in the future they're going to require of everybody that everybody is verified, and so it would be redundant. the extra mark might mean something, but the idea that everybody should be using their names and their names are verified, or their name and their photo and their photos, I don't know how you could do it. You could have verified photos and you could have verified names, because when you're verifying yourself through Stripe Identify, which is their partner, you have to do that. It's facial recognition verification with your state ID. So your facially recognition verified photo could be used as your avatar, and your name is obviously verified. So the question is, could you also verify what people are putting in their bio? That gets a little more tricky.
Hey Tyler,
Yes.
this is Jeff, Clubhouse
Hey,
Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah, what I thought about is the fact that this used to be socially policed, and we used to socially allow people into Clubhouse. So it's totally changed since they've opened it up to everyone, and opened it up to anybody being able to create accounts. So like multiple people have created accounts and things, and so that's really changed the way it was policed initially. So now I think it's needed. The verification part is needed to some extent, just to verify the person's real. As opposed to before. And a lot of companies and things have their own accounts. And then there's even ones that are clips. So someone created a clips account, and then they just put that account in there. Yeah. So it's definitely changed. So I agree with you guys on the verification is needed at some point now.
And Tyler, I'm just wondering also with all these, already with 24-hour news cycles, we have so many talking heads, right? Opinion heads on some of these mainstream media stations, and they're just trying to fill time. I get the idea about with the experts. That'll be great in terms of nipping some news item that may come out and then say, okay, this verified expert is saying, no, stop, listen, right? Because it reaches more than any mainstream media, these our social media platforms. So I'm wondering, but could we get into a situation where we have too many talking heads on so many different platforms, creating so much noise that we're going to get to a place where we'll need some other solution to solve it?
So check this out. Imagine Google buys Clubhouse, knock on wood. And when there's breaking news, like the Texas shooter story, you go to google.com and you search for Texas shooter or whatever. And the first result is an actual Clubhouse room that anyone can click and get into instantly. And that room could get very, very, very big, very, very, very quickly. Millions of people, maybe tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions. And they could work together to invite in experts. Anyone could ping anyone they know. When you have a room of 1 million people, 10 million people, 100 million people, you could probably find some people who know or have a really good idea of what's going on, right? Who very informative. And then that would keep the people very engaged. It would be an incredibly useful real-time resource that kind of decentralizes the power of the mainstream media sources, who themselves are trying to interview experts and get the authoritative soundbite and then share that out as a piece of content. The problem is the conventional pre-internet version of that is far inferior of a medium, of a soundbite, and the traditional and Twitter is in part to blame. I feel like the whole soundbite, a viral, clickable headline process has done everybody a bit of a disservice, and this version of social audio could rectify that essentially. And of course, that clipping nature, people would get the best 30-second clip of the best juicy truth bomb, and that would become a viral subsection of the room that people are in. And I feel like,
And you're gonna
Tyler, can I ask
rely
a
on
question?
Google for this,
So,
Tyler?
no, I don't think, no. I think
Where's
I
this
think
truth gonna come from?
I think it's similar to a Reddit like scenario where the users in the room work to invite in the experts into the room. Once the experts are in the room, people clip the room. Once people have clipped the room, they socially vote up the most appropriate clip that represents that room. And
But
then
Tyler,
the legacy is once the room closes, which it inevitably will, the 30-second clip that best represents that room will have been voted up by the participants of the whole social audio experiment. Yeah.
but don't you think that your expert may not be my expert?
True, of
How does
course.
that? How, how do you navigate those waters? Because I think the overall premise is great, but we still have these silos that even right now where the experts are, depending on what side of the conversation you're on, people have the people that they're listening to,
Yeah.
and there are other people that they aren't listening to that have valid information.
You know what? That's a great point. I guess I would
Truth
counter.
is real. Truth becomes relative,
Yeah,
Tyler, in
I
that
agree. I
scenario.
agree. However, and I agree there's a big polarization problem, but I think I'm optimistic that there's still more people in the middle than on the margins, on the polarized
Yeah, exactly.
extremes, and that the middle will drive the votes that drive up the quote unquote truthiness, and at times it will appease one of those sides on the extremes and will perturb people on the extremes. But I think generally the consensus will have a bell-shaped like curve to it.
There is a community that uses create or coins, and I was just listening to it last night with Mark Andreessen, and they were discussing how the coins were used, crypto, and then using those to upvote, and then people would purchase, so social proof and then actual crypto proof, and then as you put that energy in there and social energy into that, then that kind of proves out, and whoever expends the most energy is going to prove that document is real.
Tyler, do
Or
you think people would upvote the things in the middle, or will we end up in a world where the most provocative thing gets upvoted? Because we've seen that
good
before.
point.
If this is a very important question, because if the way that media is working today kind of panders to the extremism and the extremists. And what I'm proposing is, how do you re-architect uh, a medium to deliver news that plays to the strengths of the non-extremists? And that's what I'm proposing. Is that I would trust that this room that we're in, and all the nearly 400 people that are in it, if we took any kind of vote on any issue, or if an expert came in here, I would trust that people would be clipping that expert. Like, let's imagine some big traumatic thing just happened, right? And it's very internationally newsworthy. And then we invite in an incredibly relevant expert on that, or multiple experts on that topic. I would trust that, and the audience has the ability to clip 30-second audio clips. I believe that I would trust that a room like this would do quite a very good job of picking out the best audio clips and then attach those to this room, and that the people in this room and the people who come after this room would do a fine job of voting up truly the most relevant clip. So it would be a crowdsourced voting of,
like Reddit.
That's what Reddit does, and that's why I'm confident in this process, because Reddit's already doing this. So that's why you can see that the most intelligent comments about any article are voted up, and it's consistently shows that works. So I think that it's not. I don't think it's a stretch to imagine it. The scenario that I'm suggesting. And
You mean popular, not intelligent. You mean
yeah,
popular.
yeah,
Yeah,
popular.
Important distinction.
That's
Important distinction.
but yeah, it
well,
is. But I think Reddit is notably not very extremist in if you go through an unfiltered popular, what, like you said, populist, you go to the most
Reddit does self-police. It's very interesting. I
it's
mean,
super
people will
interesting.
shut you down if you. People will shut down bullshit right away.
yeah.
That's moderation.
Yes,
That's
It's not
exactly so.
moderation though. It's the crowd. Like if someone posts something and it's bullshit, I'll call them out. I'm like, that's
That's
bullshit.
community moderation,
it is
though.
community
Yeah, you're
That
moderation.
is
right.
Yeah.
what
I'm
it is.
sorry. You're right.
We do it
Yeah,
here.
That's also what's working on Clubhouse.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
that's my point. Anyway,
There's a good chapter in The Brain by David Eagleman, excuse me, which is a companion to the PBS series. He was discussing how the extremists, and when you do that extreme, what happens in your brain and how it fires, and then how you make those decisions based upon that, and that's how the extreme happens. And so I found that fascinating because I could see how that plays into a lot of our social media today.
yeah.
So.
But I don't know. I mean, and I've been in rooms with like it was I think it was Harvard business cases or whatever, and it became really nasty. Kind of there's this thing I guess that I'm noticing in the States called woke. I don't know if this is a touchy subject, but it became this discussion of how the
You've got a
mob.
bit of that in Sweden as well, though.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, but I've tried to avoid it, like the plague. And so does my brother in academia. But anyways, and it's just there's these touchy subjects, and I was sitting there, and there was these Harvard professors in the room, and then there were the other very, very opinionated people, laying down judgments, and that were a lot of them quite false on how they perceive things are, and the Harvard professors were quiet, totally quiet. And I was talking on the back channels with them saying, so do you guys agree on these things? Like, no, not whatsoever. So I was just thinking, why don't they speak up and say it? And
Well,
they don't dare to.
here's
They
my
don't
point.
want to.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't
yeah.
want to
Well,
take they don't want to take the hate. They don't
right.
want to take the heat.
Yes. Here's my
And they can lose their jobs, and people have lost their jobs.
yes.
Professors.
Yep. But by the way, the people who get a little bit extreme in their political or social views, um, can consolidate power in traditional media and even in traditional Twitter. I think in social audio format as a new medium, when you have true diversity, true like real global diversity of people from every continent, that the extremists don't function very well because their extremist views are recognized as being extreme, and they don't really hold up in a global population. They work fine in if the entire room is a small demographic, geographically or demographically, by age or by and I've seen that often in Clubhouse, where the rooms where extreme views are able to take root is when there's quite a homogenous population in the room. And when you get a very global audience with a lot of different views and a lot of different ages, it doesn't stand up to the scrutiny of a truly globally diverse viewpoints.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Tyler. But does that actually happen?
I've
Like,
seen it. I'm just saying we don't get a lot of extremist. We do get some extremist views in here, but they get kind of checked in a way where they're not used to being checked because they're used to functioning in a space where they have sort of a majority, and they like to go into venues where they have the majority to consolidate power, but they don't really function well in fully bigger open demographics.
I want
well,
to support that thought, Tyler, because I don't know if you guys
And
remember
I'm speaking both left and right, by the way.
about 3 months ago, where the Palestinians and the Jews got together, and for 7 straight days,
Yes.
they were able to have conversations not about politics, but about their personal experiences. And what made that room work was that they had a group of moderators, and they had gotten together before they actually opened this room and set out the course of how they wanted to run the room. And they were very, very strict on staying with their goals. And so when people got up and started talking about being a rebel or killing people, they shut them down. They sit them down, back down to the audience. They gave them another opportunity to come on stage. And if they started that stuff again, they just kicked them out of the room.
Yeah.
Well, that Irvin is the green bean magic in the right hands. But there are, I mean, I think it just depends on the room and the moderator.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
The counterexample being the anti-vaxxer rooms.
Yeah, so it's the exception, not the norm. We need that to become the norm, unfortunately, or fortunately.
Okay.
We need those exceptions.
So the second biggest headline of the day is that YouTube says it will stop making their year-end rewind videos after canceling the 2020 edition due to the pandemic, after shelving last year's iteration of the YouTube Rewind due to the hardships and heaviness of 2020. YouTube has exclusively confirmed that it is doing away with the annual compendium for good. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. You'll have to find a way to survive without YouTube's year-end summary. Life will go on, and if you need a support group, we can make a room dedicated to that for those who want to grieve and express their sadness and sorrows over that. So then, I can't believe that's the second biggest headline of the day. That's truly disturbing. So the next one is from The Verge, that hackers have now defaced Twitch for a few hours this morning, replacing a number of background game images with photos of Jeff Bezos. Twitch isn't having a good week. Hackers have managed to deface Twitch for a few hours this morning. And this is because Twitch itself was it Twitch that was where the source code was leaked yesterday?
Yeah, they leaked it all. It was the open kimono, you called it.
Right. So now that the source code is known, now people can get in and do whatever they want to it, like it's a piece of silly putty. And they're defacing it.
I don't see it. Which picture of Bezos? Is it the cowboy one or the one where he's got like the goggles? Those are like the two go-to Bezos pictures right now.
Yeah, it's they got to change up some things over there because they're now a totally open book to hackers now that the source code's out. So that's a problem.
Which means that they were relying on security by obscurity, which is the worst way to secure anything.
So the next one, number 4, is that Microsoft acquires a company called Ally, Allly, whose software helps companies track and hit their goals. And the next one is from The Verge, that Governor Gavin Newsom of California signs a new act called the Silence No More Act, which ex-Pinterest employee Ifeoma Ozama helped draft to protect California workers who call out discrimination despite having signed non-disclosure agreements at their place of work, as she did at Pinterest, which made it difficult for her to whistleblow about the discrimination she was facing, or she claims to have faced, at Pinterest. So California Governor Gavin Newsom signed the act Thursday night, a historic piece of legislation authored by the state that should protect workers who speak out about harassment and discrimination, even if they've signed a non-disclosure agreement. Pinterest whistleblower Ozoma began pushing the bill forward after coming forward with allegations of racism against the tech company. She knew she was partially protected by the Stand Together Act Against Non-Disclosure Act, a Me Too era law that banned NDAs in sexual harassment cases, but soon realized the bill did not provide protections for other forms of abuse. Now that's changing. Workers in California will be legally protected for speaking out about discrimination based on race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, ancestry, disability, and age. The law could have enormous implications for the tech industry. Hold that thought. We will come back to that. Far bigger than people realize, as I will make clear, which is famous for having workers sign extremely restrictive non-disclosure agreements. While it will only protect employees in California, Ozama plans to expand it to other states. The bill is sponsored by the California Employment Lawyers Association, and it will go into effect January 1st. Pinterest agreed to proactively stop making workers sign NDAs that keep them from discussing their personal experiences at Pinterest back in April, after Ozama's accusations, but months ahead of the law's passage. So good on them. Apple, however, refused to add language to its employment agreements to make it clear that employees could discuss workplace harassment and discrimination after activists and Apple shareholders pressured the company with a shareholder resolution. Okay, now, what's particularly interesting about this is yesterday, Miss Azoma was in the news for launching something that I gotta just pull up the article to remind myself. It was called the Pinterest. The headline from The Verge yesterday, and severals, of course, was "Tech whistleblowers have a new handbook to help them safely expose problems at work." And the woman who went public about Pinterest workplace problems created a handbook to help tech workers safely become whistleblowers. The whistleblowing has increasingly dominated news cycle in Silicon Valley's high-stake tech industry lately, from spectacular meltdowns like Theranos to the ongoing drumbeat of internal reckoning among management at Facebook, with the Wall Street Journal Facebook files recently. But while the results of it has resulted in Senate hearings this past week. And by the way, that whistleblower from Facebook is now scheduled to reappear January 6th in another Senate hearing. But while the results of whistleblowing on an employer make headlines, how the person behind the story decided to come forward is for most people a mystery. A new guide released today aims to change that, dubbed the Tech Worker Handbook. The comprehensive collection of resources offers insights into each step of the whistleblowing process, from potential legal ramifications to working with reporters and security measures to consider. The project, spearheaded by Pinterest whistleblower Azoma, includes research and resources for whistleblowers working with the press and working as a conduit between employees and stories. The effort is funded by Pierre Omidyar Network. At its core, the project aims to help tech workers who are considering coming forward with important information to make more informed decisions. Preparedness is power. And they added that this would-be whistleblowers should not have to rely on whisper networks to figure out how to contact a journalist, an employment attorney, and a government regulator, etc. So now that there's a website to guide, they call it a guidebook, to guide whistleblowers, and a legal law to protect them more thoroughly for instances other than sexual harassment, so now all forms of harassment, you're likely to see a whole bunch of more whistleblowing, a whole bunch more. And there was a headline in the past 24 hours about a whistleblower from Tesla who was just awarded $137 million. Here it is, New York Times. Jury orders Tesla to pay $137 million to a former worker over racist treatment. A federal jury in San Francisco has ordered Tesla to pay nearly $137 million. So, now, let's put these dots together. These all happened in the past 48 hours. You've got the whistleblower guidebook. We already have a bunch of whistleblowing happening at Facebook and at Pinterest and at Apple. Our friend, what's her name again? The lady at Apple.
Frances Hagen.
No, that's Facebook.
Ashley
Gjovic. So we've got whistleblowers happening at multiple big tech companies at the moment already. Now we've got a guidebook so that they can coordinate how to do this most expeditiously, most effectively, efficiently. And we've got a new law that really makes it more protected in California for the time being, although they said they'll spread it elsewhere. And we've got a jury giving $137 million to one such individual at Tesla. And we've got the press super eager to punish big tech for their faults and to take them down. Make no mistake about it. The Wall Street Journal is doing cartwheels, and even in their own stories about Facebook are patting themselves on the back in their own stories and reminding its readers that the Senate hearing of the whistleblower was inspired by their own coverage the weeks prior. So they're taking credit for these Senate hearings. The Wall Street Journal, in their own articles of the whistleblower's testimony before the Senate, congratulates itself and reminds its readers that this is a result of their own investigations with this whistleblower, meaning they are very happy with what's the kind of political pressure that's now being put on Facebook as a result of their own work, and they want everyone to know that. So here's my point: is that the corporate journalism is very eager to punish big tech however possible. I would also argue, and I would use this Tesla jury settlement, the Tesla jury award, or what's the word I'm looking for? The outcome of this Tesla jury also points to the fact that
Verdict.
even say again, Cheryl.
Verdict.
The verdict.
Verdict, yeah, that the verdict of this Tesla jury also points to the fact that even the general public, there's a large percentage of the general public who's also eager to bring some justice to what they see as the big tech companies that made an absolute killing during COVID while they were stuck at home. So these things put together could spell big trouble. As I said, when I read the article, I said, put a pin in that thought, that this could lead to some really big problems for tech in the very near future. That's a toxic combination of ingredients that are
So
happened in the
Tyler,
past 48 hours. Yeah.
Tyler? Yep,
go ahead. Go
Tyler.
ahead. Sorry.
Ingredients.
So Tyler, you were talking about the whistleblower handbook. So
Yes.
so listeners, there's a website called whistleblowers blog.org. Check it out. They've got a handbook. They call themselves the Whistleblower News Network, the WNN. I just tweeted an article from there to you, Tyler. There's been and if you go through all the articles in the last 10 days, the number of settlements of whistleblowers, a lot of us don't even know, but there's a whole website of news, the Whistleblower News Network. They have their own news channel, by the way.
Now, there's another point I want to raise in all of this, because big tech have big teams. These big tech companies like Tesla and Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Apple have 100,000 team members. And out of 100,000 team members, somebody's going to say something stupid. It's only a matter of time. So, and people, I'll say this in the most, well-intended way. Let me put it this way. We've seen headlines from psychologists that say post-COVID, the airlines crews are pointing out just how sensitive people are post-COVID while they're on flights. People are very agitated, looking to be offended. People are very sensitive. People are very uncontrollable and a bit not their normal selves, not their pre-COVID selves. So add that into the mix as one of the potent ingredients in this powder keg that is likely to explode in the next days and weeks to come for big tech, when you've got 100,000 team members who have just gone through COVID, who are coming back to offices, who, people are likely to be a bit not a little on edge, not their normal selves, and this massive verdict from a jury, quite a handsome reward there, and a lot of protection and a guidebook for whistleblowing. I think this big tech has to be very, very, very careful indeed, because we might start seeing quite a bit more lawsuits and
It's
whistleblowing in the near future.
pucker time if you're a CEO of a tech company.
Well, at the same time, I have to say that, like we've been saying, this is a coordinated effort across multiple fronts to essentially lead to a point where big tech has less power, right? I mean, isn't this? You've alluded to it, Tyler, but I'm just going to say it. It's coming across from the places where we agree around the impact it's having on our kids, right? Easy place to start. Then you add to that the fact that they're hurting competition, right? There's all of the mistrust in big tech is not just coming from the big corporate media, it's coming from our politicians and others. And so I'm not surprised. I, for one, personal opinion, I think big tech has too much power already. And so it's like, maybe it's what happened to, as you guys know, it happened to corporate organizations before, and everything got changed, and it led to a bunch of new corporates. And so, I mean, I'll let you know when I shed a tear for big tech. I do wonder if this is a good thing. I mean, you've seen the environments at these large tech companies. They're not always the most open to different types of voices and so on. My bigger concern is, is this going to have an impact on all of tech, including all these small startups that are at, seed, Series A, Series B. Suddenly you have to do a bunch of compliance work, which is not, you don't have money for. Do you think this is going to trickle down to like innovation in general, or is it just going to affect big tech? That's sort of the bigger question, because the culture is the culture.
Dr. Danish, I think it needs to come in at the startup stage, right? I mean, there's just workplace, there's levels of professionalism that you kind of expect at the workplace, and you kind of need to set that early, because as founders, we don't have enough time later on to figure it out.
I'll push back and I'll just say that what makes a startup great is the fact that there isn't a bunch of, like, you're in a small group, you're just kind of going, and having a bunch of formality around that can be detrimental to a group
But
growing.
it doesn't mean, but Dr. Danish, it doesn't mean you can make racial epithets in your meetings or, get into racial stuff. We don't do that in our meetings. Like,
I don't think that's
of
what he
course,
was
but that's
saying,
not the,
Chris, though. I think
yeah.
Dr. Danish was saying, for those of us that are smaller and in the stage that we're in, are we going to fall under a
you need
potentially
to
less
cover,
onerous regulatory burden?
you need to
That's
cover
all he's
your
saying.
ass though, Anna. Like, if you have IP, you need to put your IP in a holding company to separate it from the operating side, because one single $140 million lawsuit will wipe out your entire enterprise. And that's what you guys don't, I don't want to lecture you, but that's what I've always understood about IP is if you got something huge, you separate the IP from the operation, period.
Yeah, it's easier to say before you get VC money, though. So I was going to say that, when you have other investors who are investing in your company, they're hoping your company takes its IP and allows that IP to mature into a large organization, and the IP actually is at the core of it, right? You're a tech company, and so I was going to say that, I think I understand your point, but the tech or the IP and the operations are intimately linked, and so kind of going back to the point that I was making, which is what you're going to see happen is what you've seen in regulated industries, and what makes tech beautiful is you move fast and break things. And sometimes when you're moving fast and break things, some people get left behind. You're working with somebody, they're not a great fit. You end up saying, hey, this is not working out. And then now as a small startup, you have to like worry about other things while you should be worrying about your product. It is much more complicated and nuanced. And my bigger concern is this going to lead to a different type of culture in tech across the board, across all levels? And I would hate to see what makes it beautiful become not so beautiful. So yeah, big tech, of course, is going to be affected. Maybe it should be affected. You hear these horror stories, but the bigger question to me is like, is this just going to affect tech culture in general? Are we going to become more quote unquote woke, which I find to be like an interesting word, but are we going to be sanitized like crazy in an industry that's supposed to be messy and dirty to begin with? Because
Can
that's
I
where
can
the dime's going to come.
Dr. Danish, I would just offer some different words because it's messy and dirty and break things are problematic. It just kind of period. So I would just simply nimble. And words are important, right? So that we need an end to the idea that we just put we break things. Disruption is a better word, but just having a thought of as you're leading the company, you are everything you do and don't do is an expression of culture, right? So I mean the idea of looking out for the stakeholders and defining those are expressed in your culture. So startups are tough. I call them effing startups, right? Because
Yeah, but But David, what you just did, by the way, what you just did is something you don't want happening in a startup. Like literally us worrying about words when we're trying to solve the world's biggest problems together is literally the thing that I'm trying to avoid. Because that's what happens when you start sanitizing. Like now everybody's thinking like, well, what words should I use so I don't break, and again, I agree with you at some
Amen.
level. I think as you become more corporate, it's important. But and to be honest, we're going through that phase, so I am learning. I'm getting a lot of this training right now. But the point is, as you're making in the early days, who the fuck gives a shit? Like honestly, like you're supposed to solve a problem, right? Like and that's all you should be thinking about. Like when that Coinbase founder said that, I felt like maybe they were too late stage to say that, but he's not wrong per se. That this is your mission. Come in and fix the freaking problem. Like, let's focus on what we're doing right now. And
But so,
Tyler, sorry about cussing so much. I was just saying, like,
No, it's
at the end of
fine.
the day, like, I'm getting very, I want to be very careful because this is such a crazy, slippery slope. And it's not about racism is wrong. My co-founder is black. We are very good about, you want to fix the racism and sexism problem in tech? Get representation. It's an easier way to go. Sanitizing is not the right answer. Representation is the right answer. And I think that like that's the honest truth. Like tech doesn't need sanitization at its ground level. It's supposed to be dirty. I'm going to say that again because diamonds come out of the rough. And so at the end of the day, it's supposed to be crazy. It's supposed to be messy because disruption doesn't happen in a sanitized environment. Anyways, sorry to kind of lose my shit, but I hope it's clear. Like to worry about messaging before you've worried about solving the problem seems like putting the cart before the horse.
but
Also
Dr.
getting
Ganesh, one last closing thing. You're raising money because of your prowess as a manager, and you're earning the trust of of your investors because you can. All I'm going to say is just have faith that the words are important and they help you when you're trying to hire people. Even so, and I apologize, I missed a part of the intro of this point, but. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. You can do it. And the culture that you put in the beginning is the trajectory you're on. But,
That is true. I just want to say that talent is going to be the biggest problem for any startup. It's so big, and the culture is part of that. It is super important. But it's tricky. I mean, for us in Sweden, I mean, we train. There's like I don't know. There's like 5% or maybe 10% of really in schools that are a group of people that would be in the Swedish system. You have to have a quota to get women in tech, and you have to have a quota of other people who are disadvantaged who come into tech. But as a startup, I want to have the brightest, best, fastest coders in the world. And if I take a pool from a Swedish system, I don't know if I'm going to get that because the pool just got really small suddenly, right? If I just go for the fastest, best, brightest. If
from
someone tells me, no, you don't do that. You do not get to think about the brightest, the best. You have to think about these quotas here. I'm
and
like, oh,
also from a
okay.
sorry. And also
Well,
from a
as
business sense, you have to think worldly, right? So I mean, I think from a common sense perspective, just be a company that's actually relatable to the world. Otherwise, you are going to get cut off. You're going to actually have problems. So if you you don't have to think in terms of, oh, I need to have certain quota, this. Just think of like, okay, who am I serving? Who am I actually going to go? How am I going to be presented to the world? Don't be like a bro culture. Don't read those books that say basically this is how it's supposed to be. No, it doesn't have to be this way. That's how it was for them. It's just basically create the company that you want, and the culture is important. And what you set the tone as a leader is what's going to reflect on your employees too, and they take the lead from that, right? And again, also from coming from a rehab perspective, motor vehicle accidents, the cases, right? There's always going to be someone who's going to take advantage of the situation, right? There's going to be injuries, but there are some people who will expound it more than it is. And that's what I think we're maybe making this too big of a problem. Yes, there's a problems, but also making it like so that it's company wide, system wide will be an issue, like based on a few cases. That's just my thought from Rehab's side.
I was like, in Sweden, is it the quota, like the gender quotas, right? There isn't racial quotas, which would be very difficult to do in Sweden, but because for reasons Swedes understand, like how they don't really intentionally don't have any kind of recognition of race. So but on the gender quotas, the those could be people internationally, theoretically, right? So if you hired a Asian woman from Asia to be on the board or whatever, that would suffice, would it not? They don't have to be from Scandinavia.
No, yeah. It's very. I mean, it's very how. I mean, you can get funding from soft funding from EU and from not. I mean, not maybe not EU, but Sweden is a little more harder on that. There has to be the 50-50 company kind of thing. Not maybe at the kind of pre-seed phase, but at least seed phase. There, if you want to get funding, they really look at that, and you have to report it during that project continuously, like who's in the company. Do you have equality from that perspective? And that I think is fine. You're right. I mean, and that's what we do. We you find really bright people from sales. You find really bright people for the boards. But there again, if I have two women and I have, I don't know, 100 men, then it just becomes really difficult. But if in sales those things don't really matter because it's the applicants is usually like 50-50. But in other situations, it just becomes kind of weird mind game that I kind of feel is strange. The other thing though is that, like you said, internationally, Sweden has problems again. I think I talk about this too much, but we cannot hire and incentivize really brilliant people in our company because they if they don't fall under the tax laws of Sweden, then they don't get these really nice options program that the tax system supports only in Sweden. But if you're from international country, I mean, if you're not in Sweden, then that doesn't apply to you. So we're kind of out of luck then. Yeah, but we have a workaround.
I think to Donish's good question about how will all of the recent headlines we read and the whistleblowing and the media and in some sense people have taking more negative tone towards big tech, I think that plays to the strength of small tech because the team members at Facebook were like, you know what, enough of this big. It's getting a little uncomfortable in this environment where the media is attacking big tech and the government's cracking down on big tech, and even it's not as appealing to be in big tech as a team member. I think that's to the benefit of startups generally.
Yeah, that's what I said last time. It's hiring time.
Well,
At the same
not
time,
just big tech though, Tyler and Aslak. It's across the board. I mean, there's a big exodus coming out of. I can speak to the medtech space, and maybe others would follow suit. I don't know how fintech looks, but for medtech, there's a lot of people in senior executive positions at these large companies that have been moving on and finding their way into the startup ecosystem, and I think it is a bit of just this culture and kind of being over it, ready to move into something that doesn't have all of the layers.
Right.
and another key thing that people kind of on the outside don't really fully understand, and people on the inside, quite frankly, is startups. Just like Dr. Donish said, they're it's not easy. They are tough, and whether it's a manager or an engineer jumping ship at a giant corporation that's serving you food and doing these things, is very different from the early days in startups. These are two different worlds. And whether you are successful or not, it depends on a whole bunch of things. So we get back to Donish was bringing up a really great point about it is friggin' tough. They're effing startups. They're a big challenge. Even raising the money is one of the challenges. But it's a rock. I kind of, the metaphor I like to use is the first fistful of people is like your rock band. I mean, you're literally, how well they work together, the music that they together are creating is what helps with the success. You know, you might have a great guitarist, but if the drummer can't keep a beat, you got to run him out the door.
One
Or
other
her.
interesting aspect is that in the same way that Silicon Valley has lost its sort of geographic monopoly on power and innovation, and it's sort of been more decentralized globally, geographically. I think that's even true of the U.S. I think the U.S. in general had a disproportionate power where people would want to move to the U.S. to build their tech companies. And I think now that India's booming, they've created more unicorns this year than America has, more than anyone has, more than anyone has in the history of tech. So, and I think South America and Africa are next up on the agenda, and they're paving the fundamental kind of infrastructure now to enable that. So it'll take a couple more years before we start seeing the unicorn, uh, you know, explosion that we're seeing in India at the moment. But because of that, by the way, there's a headline today and yesterday that a Goldman Sachs team, somebody from Goldman Sachs, took a bunch of co-workers together, and they're departing to go focus on Africa. I'll read that headline in the next 30 minutes, but that speaks to my point, which is I think they've read the tea leaves. They know the data. They know where things are going. Google as well wants to bring a infrastructure and to help digitize Africa. Facebook, that was yesterday's headline. Google's committing $1 billion to Africa and wants to digitize Africa. They had a big event, Google for Africa, 2 days ago. Facebook in the past 24 hours announced they want to bring the world's longest sea cable to Africa, and they want to go big into Africa. This is my point. Those are the infrastructural type moves of, building the roads and the airports, the digital versions of that, the same kind of digital equivalents that will enable, what we're seeing in India now. It'll take a couple more years, but here it comes. And as such, why would you focus on the U.S. when it might be a little more, you got 1 billion people in Africa? Well, why are you focused on the U.S. might not have the same sort of magnetic appeal that it used to have, especially for people from India, from Africa, from Southeast Asia. Why not focus on your home markets now that you can? I think for the past 10 years, people around the world thought, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I need to go to America because that's where it's all happening. But now it's happening in your backyard. So,
well, Tyler,
yeah.
I think we were a little bit talking about it this morning. One of the issues here, for example, in Africa, is that the funding is not here. So all the money, all the ventures, all those that we see happening is, like you said, they come from outside of Africa, and then the funding is outside of Africa, and then even the productivity and the wealth building is happening outside of Africa. So it is really, how do I say it? It's not indigenous kind of ecosystem that Silicon Valley had. They had the whole ecosystem happening. So to a very, very tiny extent, Nigeria is trying to do it by having their own startup ecosystem, accelerator, and even having angel investment where they are funding, the pre-seed in early stage where, indigenous businesses can have a fair shake. Other than that, really, all the successful things are happening for non-Africans, just focusing on the African population. And that's what we were discussing fundamentally. I think a little bit, I don't know, Vinay, you may be much, much better positioned than me, but in India, what's happening is they are building for the Indian population. The wealth is being within India, and it's just duplicating ecosystem after ecosystem because the money is really, fueling more and more activities and funding and other things. That's what I see on the ground anyway. So I think some kind of structural adjustment need to happen on how these things are happening. So even if Google comes here, there's nothing that actually stays behind in Africa.
getting access and getting the pipe is the easiest part of all this. If you go back a couple decades, Latin America, there are other regions of the world that had the startup fever, right? And you could even go back if you go back far enough, just outside of Silicon Valley, you got Digital Coast in the Southern California, and then New York, and the strides it's made over the decades. But it's the capital is a key thing on the stool, but also there's a skill set of building companies, and then there's how do you build companies in these different parts of the world. Like India, they've figured it out. In Africa, there's going to be just very unique ways that you need to on your go to market, right? Holy cow, go to market's tough enough out of Silicon Valley, let alone how do you go to market in a specific country, or if you're trying to do a continental play in Africa. So it'll be, there's gonna be some going through some pains, but it's definitely is exciting times, especially just with this chapter of the next 10 plus years, where the climate challenge, right, is just kind of go to a whole new level, and it's going to have implications on just everything we do.
So I think we should also talk about the fact that the American startup culture is what's actually spreading right around the world. If you listen to entrepreneurs from around the world, they often refer to, the Elon Musks, or the PayPal mafia, or the books, the Thiel books, and all that stuff. I mean, we haven't heard the other direction. We haven't heard the startup stories from the other side. So I'm wondering also the culture part. Like, I think we should make culture 2.0, Silicon Valley 2.0 culture, where all those mistakes that were made from the culture that created Silicon Valley could be tweaked a bit, right? So there has been a lot of lessons learned, but I don't see it being reflected. It's more like, okay, we'll get this token in here, and that'll cover our, diversity, inclusion, or whatever. That's what I see in Silicon Valley happening all the time. I don't see any real meaningful change because it's uncomfortable. Because I think they've got into a stage where it's normal, right? Like, we get into these groups, we feel comfortable. It's like David was saying, like, Ben, you feel comfortable with the people maybe, but of course you may not discover that amazing drummer who's maybe like drumming away 2 blocks down the road because they were not part of the same clique, right? So I like discovery, and like hopefully with the more remote and all this remote work, we'll be able to find these greater people out there. Just a
Well,
thought.
to add even to that, Heman, is that if you look at all, pretty much 99.9% of funded African startups and successful ones are being registered outside of Africa. Unless all investors, whether angel or venture or anything, they will ask you to register in the US, Delaware C Corp, or something like that, or in the UK.
Delaware
That's on
Otherwise,
Delaware C
purpose,
corp.
though. That's
Delaware
on
I
C
purpose,
corp.
know.
though. Yeah.
I know,
No, but
and
there's a
that's what
reason.
I'm
There's a
saying.
There's
reason.
Everything.
laws. Yeah.
It's the reason. Yeah, Delaware C corp is a business law. It's been established since the 1800s, and it's a known for investors. They know how cases are going to end up in Delaware, and that's why they
Like
tend
standard,
to push us to domicile
right?
there.
Like standard accounting principles, same ISO standard sort of in manufacturing, but more for like VCs.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
struggling for
also
the
more.
word, but
It's also more like the Chancery is very, very pro
chancery,
corporation.
chancery. That's
Yeah.
where.
Yeah. So the Chancery is very pro-corporate, a bunch of things, and the likelihood of Delaware C Corp law changes is like close to zero. They want to keep things the same. So if you're a startup, you have to remember, if you're a startup based out of Africa, Messi, you have so many other challenges that you have to, there's not a very well-established tech stack in Africa, things like that. That's changing. But the one thing you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where literally the government could be, there's so much, there could be changes from the government side or from the nationalization side. So I think people are just trying to prevent that. But, I will push back him and very, very strongly to what you just said, which is that everybody kind of looks at Silicon Valley 1.0. I can tell you we have had this entire explosion of underrepresented founders who are getting funded now. We've got this entire explosion of female founders that are starting to get funded. The numbers are still pretty low, but if you looked at it 10 years before, and the prototype is changing. I mean, we all are seeing different types of CEOs than just, I don't even consider Elon Musk a startup founder. He didn't have a product and raised like $1 billion. I'm just saying, like, that's not like a real, if you compare yourself to Elon Musk, you're either,
Masters of the tech world.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say is like, the people are comparing themselves to different types of founders now. The founder culture has changed significantly. I am going to get canceled for this comment, but I think that Silicon Valley is going to correct itself on its own. I think it's going to be the best way to correct itself. I think regulators from the outside have too much of an agenda. They have too many corporate donors. They have too many other things going on. And, we should let Silicon Valley correct itself, because I'm telling you right now is we're trying to hire employees. The fact that the person that's leading the tech team is a person of color, that matters to the employees. The fact that our leadership in our C-suite, we have 2 women, people care about that. Trust me. And so what I'm trying to tell you is like it's correcting itself in real time. Let's not let the blue jackets come in and try to tell us how to do things the way
Oh,
we're supposed
definitely.
to.
And also one thing that I don't think we should also just talk about color. It's also like socioeconomic status, right? Because if you think about it, these individuals are also coming from wealthy backgrounds, right? And because they're comfortable in that ecosphere, right? They're comfortable in that. I'm not judging anything here, but I think intersectionality has to be brought in, because we don't talk about the fact that in Apple, right, there's a whole different culture, the change that happened there too. And so intersectionality, we should really be talking about. That's socioeconomic, that's gender, that's culture, that's race. I mean, everything, right?
Yeah, we need to first attack the big problems. Women are not getting funded.
Right.
Black
Exactly.
women are
Yep.
not getting funded.
Yep.
Black women are so these like
Agree.
less than 0.2% of VC funding went to Black women. There is a race component to this. I don't want to go into that too much because we don't want to take away from this, but there's a huge race component. It is being corrected as we speak by Silicon Valley, and I think Washington needs to keep its ass in DC. Like I'm telling you right now, it's going to actually hurt the culture.
Yeah.
I
And then
agree,
that's my point.
because since remote work, one of the problems was Silicon Valley is so expensive to live in that it was really hard for, women and founders of color, or, to move there, to be associated with a tech company, to move up the chain. But now it's not like that anymore, because most, teams of startups can be remote. And that allows for people from everywhere to be part of a founding team. And for a long time, Silicon Valley, even in Silicon Valley 1.0, Tyler, meant toward the end anyway, or maybe 2.0, assuming that Silicon Valley is now on 3.0, um, um, they're able to have their engineering teams outsourced to somewhere cheaper than in Silicon Valley, where it's expensive. And a lot of the engineering teams on these startups have been not only remote, but also of color for a long time.
Okay, let's jump into the next one, which is Microsoft reaches an agreement with investor advocacy nonprofit called As You Sow to make its devices easier to fix, increasing access to spare parts and repair documents so that you or anyone can fix your Microsoft hardware. And make no mistake, and Francine will confirm that this is a very clever kind of strike,
Jab at Apple.
a jab at Apple, yeah, because this is being contemplated against Apple and they know it. And Microsoft jumps out and shows, hey, what's the problem? We just did this. Anyone can do this, just like they did with their App Store. Hey, anyone can make an App Store inside of Windows. Nobody asked you, Microsoft. Everyone's talking about Apple. And will Apple let them make an App Store inside of Apple's platform? Everyone's talking about Apple. If they'll let Apple, let people do the right to repair law so you can fix your own Apple devices and whatnot. And it's always about Apple and Google, Apple and Android, Apple and Android. It's Apple and Google's Play Stores. It's Apple and Google devices. And why aren't you guys doing right? And then here comes Microsoft being like, oh, guess what? Were you guys talking about fixing shit? Oh, by the way, you can fix all your shit you want now on Microsoft products. Yeah, well, nobody asked you, Microsoft. Stay out of this.
My Zune. I can finally fix my Zune.
But I love that Microsoft is antagonizing this whole scenario by being a fantastically proactively good actor to show that, hey, what's the problem? We're a big tech company too. We just made it really easy. What's your problem, Apple? So Apple.
So
And
the
back
next
in the
level trolling, the next level trolling is funny to watch, but I mean, Apple it's kind of really interesting in that for a long time, they were upholding privacy and security. And there is a case to be made that you need the filters of a well-controlled app store and the filters of controlling the hardware access to your fingerprint sensor and the camera. And then that argues that you can't let just anybody fool around with it. But the thing is, look, they've been falling down on security and privacy in a very, very big way. And that is kind of eroding the only good case that there would be for the position that they're trying to take.
But hardware is the last frontier where you can assure some level of quality assurance, right? That's why they integrate the component identification features in there so that, if the EEPROM knows you've changed out a camera, it's going to alert the OS. I mean, that's the last frontier is hardware. And this goes right back to what I always harp on, the China chip story and how they embedded PCBs in the interstitial layers of our circuit boards. So I get it why Apple wants to keep the last frontier, but it's really a futile effort.
Okay. The next one is a profile of privacy activist named Ashan Sultani, who was named head of California Privacy Protection Agency on Monday. And the next one's from Financial Times that Samsung reports Q3 profits of $13.26 billion, up 28% year over year. It's best in 3 years, but warns chips could be entering a down cycle as laptop demand subsides. The next is from Vice. Oh, it's the Twitch article about as Twitch grapples with the fallout from its giant data leak. A look at the impact on its streamers who had extensive revenue and personal data leaked. And Vice interviewed some security experts who used to work at Twitch who said, well, this data about the Twitch streamers and their salaries will make them targets because some of them make a lot of money, and now people will try to hack them to get their banking info. The next one's from Search Engine Land, that Google confirms a bug that caused a problem with their URLs in iOS 15, and obviously they'll fix that. The next is from Gizmodo, how telecom partnerships and WhatsApp's compatibility with cheap mobile devices helped the messaging service become a utility in the global south, which is a great point. WhatsApp has had tremendous success. It's one of the most used apps on the planet. And the question is, how did they do that? And they focused on, we had Michelle join us in our last meeting about 8 or 9 hours ago, and she confirmed that the partnership with the mobile companies, it is a key part of that strategy, and making it free. And by the way, David?
Yeah, so one of the startups I've worked with was Apple Sim company, and for years that whole market, the cost of data, it was just beyond absurd. It was a crime. The cost of data was a crime. So having from the telcos, so the because of that, there was it thwarted it was one of the thwarting deployment vectors for tech. So as that started to get resolved by doing, they called it, I think it was over-the-top services. So the way to these WhatsApps, all these messaging, Line, WeChat, once you're able to communicate, which is like one of the very foundational, applications in all of this internet. Once you're able to do that off of Wi-Fi or there are other means to communicate, that's where it got the traction, and then that's when people started to untether from the staggeringly, just the cost for data was just horrible.
Well, we forget then those were texts that cost us 15 cents a piece, and you were paying, for minutes and paying for text. And like if they were in network, you got charged. If they were out of network, you did, or didn't get charged, vice versa. And so like that's why I think those apps took off. Is like suddenly, oh, I don't have to run, as long as I have Wi-Fi, I can communicate anywhere. That's great,
Okay, next up is Truecaller opens up 15.4% in its Stockholm stock market debut at $6.82 per share, giving it a market cap of $2.5 billion. And these are very dear friends of mine, Alan and Nabi, and the rest of the team, who I've known since the very beginning in their A round and have been part of my events since I've started doing events in Sweden. I couldn't be happier for them. It's been a long, hard battle for them to get to unicorn status, where they were on the verge of $1 billion status for a very long time. And now that they're public, boom, they jumped to 2.5. So it went, it was a long slodge up to just under 1 billion. And now they've broken way past it, and couldn't be happier for them. And we're friends on Facebook. So Nami today put up a video, a really incredibly well-produced video of the Truecaller story. So if you look up Truecaller CEO and look at his personal Facebook page, he has a really two beautiful videos that they just put up. I for sure will have him join us in Tech News Around the World whenever I do my next big Swedish event, which might be January. Who knows? But every year
You
when I
teased
do.
us yesterday that it might be October, I thought.
No. I'm going to start doing my monthly events again in October. The monthly events are just 500 people, but the big annual event is thousands of people. And normally it's in September each year. So this September and last September, we couldn't do it. So it's possible we could try and pull it off in January. We'll see. The next one is that China levies a $533 million fine on Meituan, which is their biggest delivery company. It delivers everything, for violating anti-monopoly regulations, where they were basically forcing the companies they deal with to only work with them. So Meituan would come to a restaurant and say, "Oh, great, you want to be part of the Meituan network? We got all the users using our app. Great. Of course, we can add you as a restaurant to the Meituan network. Great, just sign this contract that says you can't work with any other apps for delivery." Kind of genius. And that's why they just had this huge fine, $533 million. The next one is that a Chicago-based The Mom Project, a job site aimed at women returning to work, raises $80 million, bringing the total, it was a Series C, bringing the total raised to 106 million. So they had raised 20 previously up to their B round. That's normal. 80 million C. That's great. That means they're kicking ass. And I'm not surprised. I can guess without even looking at it that this is the deck. I've seen a company pitch very similar to this, which is pitching the concept that there's a lot of incredibly intelligent women who decided to become moms, who are at home with their kids, who have quite a bit of time to contribute to working if they can do it from home on their terms. And if you can, a lot of companies need a lot of smart people and a lot of talent. And there's a whole lot of moms that are insanely overqualified who used to work at Goldman Sachs and are now, kind of at home with a lot of cycles that they could contribute to a lot of companies. It's a lot of untapped talent. And I think it's genius. So it doesn't surprise me that this company would be kicking some serious ass.
We've used it. It is incredible. Let me just say that. You're absolutely right.
Is it what I think it is?
It's exactly what you're saying it is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I've seen. Yeah. It's one of the best
Can you
pitches I've ever
imagine?
seen. Yeah.
Can you
And if
imagine
folks
when
haven't,
you're
and if the world hasn't realized it yet, okay, I'm saying this as a man. Women are actually just better than us at a lot of these jobs. They handle it in a much different way. They have better emotional intelligence, and like I'm all for this. I mean, my wife, listen to the hectic in the background. My wife has been out for 3 out of the last 4 years from her job, and every time she goes back, she's just got a big pile of work and that she needs to work through because no one else can do it. And that's the type of people that you're now sidelining and bringing back into the workforce. So this is huge. Dr. Danish, if you could share with me your experience and the group you worked with, I'd love to find out because we need to hire too. So
Yeah, post the link, Tyler. I'd love to look at to see their deck too. Just that
Here it
sounds
Yeah, me
great. I
comes.
too.
could learn a lot on both sides.
Copy the link. Here it comes. Tweeting now to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And I'm tweeting the article. They're from Chicago. And the publication is called Built in Chicago. And they're profiling the company. The Wall Street Journal also just did a piece on them.
Oh, Tom Moorhead, I think down in the audience, says he works there or
Oh,
volunteers there.
oh nice. Hold on. Okay. Just inviting Tom up there. Okay. And there's Alexandra. Okay. Next up is Notion. Raises $275 million, led by Katu and Sequoia, at $10 billion valuation. The company was reportedly valued at $2 billion in April. That's not bad. 4xing your valuation in what? 6.5, 8 months, 7 months? Holy Christ. That's incredible. That's
And
really,
every dollar is deserved, Tyler. Have you used Notion before? It's the
yeah.
world's.
Well,
It's
everyone who
incredible.
uses Clubhouse ostensibly has. Every time you update the app, it sends you to a Notion landing page of the updates of the, yeah. Fast fact. So Alex Conrad has done a breakdown on some of the details. It says, here's some fast facts. 80% of users outside the US, 70% of revenue is from 20 million users, up 5x from April, and 20x from 2019. Okay, next up, Palantir has signed a $90 million contract to help the Department of Veterans Affairs. And a U.S. federal judge rules that Cloudflare is not liable for copyright infringement between websites that use its service. It's a host, a content network where people host websites on Cloudflare. And there was a bridal gown service who was trying to stop other people from copying their bridal gown designs, and was, whenever they found a website that was copying them, they try and shut down the website. And Cloudflare is like, we don't need to shut down that website. It's not really an issue. And then they said, okay, well, we're suing you because you're enabling your people to copy our content. And a federal judge has ruled no, that the platform is not responsible for policing copyright infringements and things like that.
That's Section 230. That's what all that is. That's why they don't police at all. They don't moderate. They don't do anything. Like, it's even questionable about the on-ramping application procedures. But I mean, I know that there's a lot of changes coming to that, but that's something that it makes everything worse for everyone. But for the fast fashion has a big history of taking the high-end couture fashion and then stripping it down minorly and making it out of cheaper fabrics. That's what fast fashion is. But they're constantly being sued. So and then the cost of the revenue they get from the clothing is just so much higher than any of the litigation. But I know people burn out in their litigation departments, within 3 years. It's like working in a consulting firm. It's crazy. There's just so many lawsuits. So I don't know. I don't think that there's a great amount of protection either way. I think that bridal company has kind of a losing battle because that's just the way things are working now, and there's no like hard and fast barrier to people copying designs. It's too easy. It's too
Yeah.
easy, and it's too easy to get more customers.
I made the same point when we brought it up 8 hours ago. It's similar with recipes in restaurants and chefs. It's like there's only so many ways you can do clothes and food, and it's constantly being developed globally on an hourly basis. It's like
Yeah, there was
good luck
oh, sorry.
getting intellectual property on a chicken masala or a peanut butter sandwich or a cheesecake or a pizza or anything. It's just or a dress or pants or a jacket. Like it's just really
Yeah.
conceivably very difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
things that go to consumers are very, very hard, and this is one of the things that people who try to get patents and stuff, or try to get very expensive IP protection, all that is a protection from like it gives you the right to sue or protect you from suit, but you still have to enforce that right. They're not magical. They're not like, you don't wave it at somebody and say, haha, I have one of these. It's basically whoever has the money and stamina to go through more like longer court proceedings are the ones that win, and the big companies all know it. But someone did try and go to court over mac and cheese, a place that was a buffet. It's actually kind of a famous case, but they had this mac and cheese everybody came for and they loved it, and a local restaurant tried to copy it and like took some and like deconstructed it and created something that was almost identical. And they went to court and they're like, well, no, I mean anybody can make that mac and cheese recipe, so so don't try to go
Was
to
it?
court over mac and cheese.
Were they trying trade secret?
They were like, that's, the Coke thing is a trade secret also, but they actually enforce it in an interesting way. They have like that in Klondike bars. They have like one person who knows the entire secret, but the rest of it is manufactured in different locations. So everybody has like a part of it. And then when it's combined together, it's usually combined under the authority of this only person who actually knows the recipe, which is like the the reason they do that is because if it leaks, they know exactly who did it. But that's the way that that trade secrets are commonly enforced in, like, at least the food industry. But in lots of manufacturing, what they do is they have to separate out all the processes, because once you work there, you're just under like a non-compete kind of agreement, and those expire. And then also they have a like they're usually under this, like, I won't steal the formula or whatever. But that's the same thing as the people who if you have some sort of IP or whatever, and someone figures out the process and then sells it, and the revenue is higher than the cost of litigation, they're gonna do it. Like, that's it doesn't work that way. So you really have to isolate your process if you're planning on doing that.
And a fun
Interesting.
fact, oops,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Chris.
A fun fact about the Coca-Cola formula, as I've read, is two people on the planet have it. Those two people can never be in the same building, fly the same flights, or even be like in the same time zone, from what I understand, which is kind of gnarly considering how big that corporation is. And then no one knows who they are.
There's two restaurants in downtown LA that both claim to be the originators of the French dip sandwich.
Yay, I've been there. I've been to the Phillips one. I think that's what
Philippe's,
one of
yeah.
them. Philippe's,
Philippe's is
yeah. And what
cool.
the other one?
Kohl's on 6th Streets. And Kohl's, they're both good. They're different. They're anyway, but they're both like they both claim that like even the same year, like 1870 or whatever it is. But Philippe's, it's cheap, super cheap place. I used to eat there quite a lot. So what's the next one? Ireland, where most U.S. tech companies have their European headquarters, says it will join the global agreement that we read about here about 6 weeks ago, where the entire world was trying to come together to stop the tax loopholes of these big tech companies who were hiding in Ireland. And Ireland was happy to have them hide in Ireland and pay very low corporate taxes. And that was the whole reason they went there in the first place. And then the whole world says, okay, let's get together and stop this. And the whole world agreed, with the exception of Ireland and one other country. I believe it was Liechtenstein, which there are a couple of tech companies based there. And but now the headline from the Wall Street Journal and others says Ireland will join the global agreement to set a minimum rate of 15% for tax corporate profits. So a 15% tax rate across the board. Facebook.
I wonder what Ireland gets in return. I mean, this is sort of unprecedented, because why would I mean, no offense to Ireland, but why would all these companies keep their businesses there? Ireland's going to lose an
Right.
arm and a leg on
Oh my
this.
God, there's a
So,
ton
like,
of
why?
reasons. Yeah, that is like that's why everything in the US they're fighting for, like, the lower taxes, why people get these sweet deals. Like Amazon was fighting, like people fought over them with the best deal. They reduce tax burden because they end up getting they do a lot for employment in the local area, and then all the people that they employ will spend more money, so that money comes back in like sales tax revenue, or in Europe VAT revenue. So like you end up, ideally, right, if you do it well, you make money, and then they also bring in other industries that are related to that. So overall, it's supposed to net out a profit, but it's about employment and additional sales.
Oh, no, no, no. I get that. What I'm saying is the new move on reversing that is going to hurt Ireland quite significantly, because it's not like it's a when it's not a tax haven anymore. All those, you're absolutely right, Alexandra. But what happens now, and I wonder what Ireland got in return. I'm sure they didn't do this out of the goodness of their Irish hearts. I think there must have been either a slap on the wrist or the other side of it, which is some benefit to them, right? Like, I mean, why would they ever reverse this?
I've noticed in a couple of areas, particularly in securities and financial areas now, we're starting to see a multinational coalition building around a lot of things. And it's a carrot and stick approach, but it's led by essentially the EU, the US, and Canada are going to all these different jurisdictions and saying, come on board with us, don't provide a safe haven for these companies. And whether it's for financial crime or financial activity in general, I think that there's going to be some sort of larger agreement where they're basically picking. I mean, often it's the U.S. They pick the U.S. regulatory scheme and then try to have it be a little bit more national, like international, and like they're doing that right now with securities. And the SEC is starting to lead this international group to prevent fraud, and they just took this hook of the FATF travel rule and attached it. And so now they have a bunch of different countries acting in tandem to make sure that rules get enforced and that people who violate those rules don't have a place to go. And that is actually doing something to stop some activity. Binance was the first one that we saw that really got this sort of international approach, where they actually leaned on the Cayman Islands even to make sure that, which is where Binance is domiciled. So the idea of the Cayman Islands going after someone inside, that's a Cayman Island company. Why the hell would they do that? That's where all their money is coming from. They got a lot of pressure, and the pressure can range from a bunch of different things. But most likely, the pressure is, if you don't join us, then anybody domiciled in your country will be red flagged in our country, and we'll do lots of, we'll audit them every year, we'll add additional taxes, whatever it is, right? So I think that's what's happening now, is in order to bring people into this scheme so that Ireland is getting a benefit at the expense of everyone else, right? So in order to make sure that there's a little bit more equality, in opportunity, but also to make sure that these bad actors don't just generate a ton of money at the expense of, the countries that they're operating in, then they're trying to pull this together. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see a huge change in how rules get enforced internationally.
I don't think they're bad actors necessarily, Alexandra. I mean, there's a lot of companies, including, Fortune 100 companies that relocated the headquarters to Ireland because Ireland offered them a competitive deal. It wasn't like a tax shelter or a safe
No, no,
haven.
no.
It was just
I'm sorry.
they
That
were
was
just being a competitive player, just like
yeah.
states compete against each other in the U.S.
No. I'm sorry. The bad actor is for people, because people did not act together for financial crimes. It was only for regular crimes. I don't know what you call that, right? But for regular crime, they worked together because there was no benefit in having a criminal within your jurisdiction. But they never did for financial crimes or avoidance or things like that. That was what I was talking about. That part of this regime, not that going to a lower tax place, right, is criminal. I'm sorry, I
No,
misspoke.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but I was trying to just go back to maybe what Danish was asking, like how. So my greater question is, after doing a multi billion-dollar relocation of your corporate headquarters, if you're Medtronic, for instance, to Ireland, if all of the things that brought you there are no longer tenable, if you're just back to where you would have been if you kept your headquarters here in Minnesota, which we have like a huge sub headquarters still here in Minnesota, but if you still kept it here, what's the next play? Like, because they're all companies are always going to look for the place, and I don't know that it matters so much really where it is anymore because we're global, right? So what is the place that becomes the hot spot like Dublin was?
Well, no, then you pull a Tesla, right? Which is you put yourself out there saying, okay, we're moving, who wants us? And then everybody bids for it. And then they go to the place that gives them the best overall deal. And then changes and they do it again. That's been what has happened in a standard manner.
Yeah, I recall when Ireland was attracting everybody to set up in Dublin as their European HQ, they also highlighted the high English ability and cultural similarity to the U.S., like one of the most similar cultures to the U.S. in Europe, and the high English ability and high literacy rates and high education rates and lower cost of operating there based on, they were really competing against London primarily. And boy, was that an interesting battle. And that, by the way, really put a fire under London's ass that, well, if we couldn't get the big tech companies, we need to get the startups and the smaller companies that are the bigger companies of the future. And they did do that under David Cameron. And they really, and I was part of these meetings where they would come to Stockholm to meet with Spotify and King, which makes Candy Crush, and the other future unicorns. They were still on the up and up, fast growing scale ups, and ask them, what would it take for you to build your European headquarters in London now that you're clearly getting a little too big for Sweden? And they were incredibly sincere about wining and dining them. And I was in those dinners. And it was a minister who would come over and take us to a very nice dinner and take down notes about their requests for what it would take for them to choose London as their HQ. And then the minister would go to a Monday meeting with David Cameron at 10 Downing Street and report on the requests from the people he had dinner with. Like, we would like this and this and this and this and this and this. And they would react incredibly quickly with a swiftness to try and meet their requests.
So Tyler, what would be what would be your recommendations for a startup, for a tech startup?
Well, let me finish that thought, because they were quite successful in doing that. In that example, both Spotify and King both set up HQs in London, and Dublin, paradoxically, has actually struggled a bit with startups because all those big tech companies that moved there hired up all the talent. So it made it a bit challenging for the Dublin-based startups to hire talent, because you have all Google and Apple and Facebook and everybody's in Dublin hiring up all the Irish talent. So it's quite a challenge. And that's, by the way, why Berlin doesn't really want Google moving into Berlin, because they want the startups to get the talent and not Google. So sorry, what was your question, Aslak?
He's wondering where should we get?
Yeah,
like,
because
is
we've had
Edinburgh,
these.
I mean, Scotland, they're all going to be on the same equal.
Yeah.
They're all buying into the same. Well, at least around tax base. That's not the only thing. That's not the only thing that's
You know,
going
Anna
to make
Marie,
your decision.
I was looking at it, and guess which continent, Messi? Guess which continent is very underrepresented in this global contract? It is Africa. You see Africa nowhere. It's fascinating. So again, I wonder if that's going to lead, because these are the types of things that actually lead to, huge booms. People want to. I love, Tyler, your point about the fact that they were English speaking, that they were educated, that they had similar cultures, and so therefore culturally it was a good fit. I've got to say, every med device company that I know that set up shop there, when you ask them why, they'll give you a very different reason. It will be, well, it's a tax haven, and I think that that's what was driving it. If there are tax havens in other parts of the world, that's where people are going to start going, and it seems like Africa and South America, here we come.
Is Aaron not on stage? Because he's DMing me some great points about Estonia is on the up and up, and which it absolutely is.
So that my question is that you who've been in the space for quite some time and really kind of looking at startup tech ecosystems, what would you say are places to be? Usually we do this kind of in a game manner.
I know.
With someone that reporting
you know what's
it.
crazy? As
But
like you and I both know that Stockholm would be booming if you could get an apartment to rent.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
that
that's
just
insane.
Tyler, I'll jump in. A
Go ahead,
bit
Aaron.
biased on my answer, and I completely agree that Africa is going to be the long-term place of growth. But certainly from a European perspective, the likes of Estonia, they haven't yet, and they will do, but they haven't yet signed up to the corporate rate, the corporate tax
Oh, they
rate.
didn't? Oh.
Not yet, but they will do. The talk is they will. But even that aside, they've got a very buoyant, government and regulatory framework that supports both startup and corporate innovation. So from a startup perspective, they bring a lot of benefits, a lot of tax benefits, employee benefits, very, very high on diversity and inclusion. So there's lots and lots of positivity in Estonia. And then from a corporate innovation perspective, the government are very much digital native. So one of the first to have digital identity at the fore. Obviously we have Bank ID and that in Sweden, but I mean deploying it right out from a government perspective as well. And so with the research that I'm doing, we're very much seeing, Estonia have been up there for the last couple of years, but that's certainly one for people to watch in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I wanted to add 2 cents, if you can hear me okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I actually did that with my previous company. We moved at the headquarters, the European headquarters from Berlin to Dublin and then back to Berlin. And it was very tough actually living, definitely finding talent, but not even Irish talent, but even relocating talent, because the cost of living in Dublin is very high, is almost at the level of London, but does not offer basically all the London perks that one would get, because Dublin is a very, very small place, and also all of the real estate is either taken by commercial companies that are building even more offices, where what is needed is housing, and the housing is extremely expensive. Therefore, really makes the whole idea of moving. You have to pay up as an employer. You just have to pay up for the cost, just for the cost of living, to an extent that is a bit ridiculous. Even I would say.
Maria, I will back you up on that point 100%. So I am a Dubliner who lives just outside London. We are moving property, and we had considered Ireland for the last 2 years. I've researched Ireland to move back home, and there's just no way I would move back home. Simply no way of moving back home. So somebody mentioned the country earlier on. I'm moving to Scotland to retain the UK benefits and what happens. The fact that it's a 1 hour flight to Europe, it's a 1 hour flight to London, whatever. You get all the benefits the UK have, as well as the tax benefits. But the cost of living to live in the UK versus Ireland is significantly different. And therefore, my point on Estonia are, even, as far as I remember, Tyler, you can look this up, I'm pretty sure they're building a railway network from Estonia to Norway.
Finland. To Helsinki.
To Finland. Helsinki. Yeah. Thank you. You're right. It's
China is trying to, yeah.
Yeah, and so Estonia are getting behind this as well from a Central European perspective, to basically have themselves connected into that hub of Europe.
Yep. Okay. So next up is
Tyler.
Yes.
Was your answer Stockholm then?
What? Oh, in terms of, it would be if we figure out the housing issue, and then if we can build higher than the default building height, and or if we could do the whole Globen area and let them build skyscrapers all around Globen, then that could work.
Okay, aim into that.
Yeah. Will they do it?
On the Africa point?
Huh?
Can I add one more thing before we move on
Yeah,
to
of
the
course.
Africa
Yeah.
point? Yeah, just kind of from my experience, traditionally, I would say that kind of operationally, Johannesburg and Nairobi were always top of the list by corporations, kind of before the startup boom that we're in now, or kind of 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then over time, we've had our offshore. Mauritius is our offshore kind of sort of jurisdiction that I run two funds out of. Some startups have set up there. They've tried to lure fintechs in previous years, hasn't really worked. One reason is because Mauritius is just too isolated, right? It's really hard to get in there. There's only like flights from Nairobi and Johannesburg and Cape Town, really. So if you're in West Africa, it's really hard to get there. Although it's great for time zone if you're working with Asia and parts of Europe and into Africa, it's just too disconnected. Even though they have all the incentives tax wise, it's good for funds, but for startups, not so much. They often require you to have a local director in Mauritius, which adds to the extra cost that startups don't have. And then more recently, we've seen Botswana try and make a play to be a hub, trying to lure startups. But my money is on actually Kigali. They've actually been quite aggressive. I mean, obviously they've been on a path for the last 15, 20 years, but as they've been recovering from genocide, and they've used to be too small a place, just kind of no one there, but now it's growing. But yeah, I would say Kigali is my bet for where particularly foreign companies set up their Africa initial like sort of base before they expand to other markets.
Tell me why.
Obviously, startups from Africa will try and go to the US first if they can for funding reasons, or Europe. Typically, it's funding driven to go to YC and be a US company in Delaware, all that. That's the trend on the Africa startup side. But say like an Alibaba or say a TransferWise or a Monzo wants to come to Africa, they're not a startup anymore. They might choose Kigali as their regional HQ to expand from there outward. That makes any sense. So I'll add that.
I'll give a little tip that just kind of the top and down agitators of what enable the vibrant startup ecosystems that do currently exist. One interesting kind of similarity is that you've got countries where the leadership becomes very startup focused, very sincerely, which, by the way, currently Macron would fit that bill on that. He's incredibly focused on startups at the moment, and they've seen very good results as of that. And then the opposite is where you have the bottom up, which is really driven by the schools, wherever you have a really good technology university is also an incredibly strong, consistent indicator historically as to where startup ecosystems thrive. So, and if you should happen to be fortunate to get both, then that's a no-brainer. But I don't know of an instance where that has happened. Yeah, usually it's one or the other.
That's a
I'm gonna
really good point. That doesn't, with regards to the local academic, the
I'm gonna
university.
I'm gonna make a unconventional recommendation for a geographic location. Southern California.
LA. You're going to say LA. Yep.
Southern California. There's no better schools. There's no better diversity of industry. There's no better talent down here.
There's also, it depends on which industry you're in. It is a big part as well. So we're starting to get geographic hotspots for different industries, which is to be expected. But that's
But I
sort
mean,
of a
you
You
want
also have
biotech,
like
you want fintech, you want industrial, you want aerospace, you want space, you want you name it. Southern California
biotech.
has it.
if Caltech
Yeah, it would be
actually put
nice
a
if the
business
government.
school in, like MIT putting in Sloan was a huge boost to Boston,
yeah.
honestly, because
It's
that
our
was
cost of living here, the taxes, and the urban sprawl that really prevents any real growth here in Southern California because we're up
we
to
Yeah,
120 miles away from each other at any given time. you know,
yeah, and the
and it
traffic,
takes.
there's like no public
Yeah,
transport. But the bigger thing, honestly, is that the investment pool here is very limited and focused on particular, like mostly like in entertainment it has been, but we don't have a diverse or at least a focused startup economic pool. We have a few people who have come either from San Francisco or
you
otherwise
know
that
what happened though, and I'm sorry to cut you off. They didn't fund Tyler when he did Silicon Beach in 2012, and Tyler, fled ship and went
Yeah.
to Stockholm. I'll be honest, that's probably what happened. I mean, because why wouldn't
Tyler,
Spotify
you
be in LA?
did this.
Did what? Yeah,
You made us
You
basically
made us
not a
poor.
startup hub
You
that we
made us
could
poor,
be.
Tyler.
no,
We're Tyler's
Yeah,
poor now.
you
no,
made us
but
poor.
the government has really never been that supportive of the startup ecosystems
No,
in
I know. That's what
LA.
we're saying. They were
Yeah.
stupid. They didn't support you, and therefore we're now 10 years down the road
So
with no
And
startup ecosystem.
so in the 90s, sorry, Tyler, the
Yeah.
Digital Coast, Orange County did have an orb. There was a big, very vibrant angel group there. And there was tech. There absolutely was tech. In Los Angeles, not so much. It was the center of mass, if you will, was in Orange County. So
And down to San Diego, David. I
Yeah,
mean, there's
it's anywhere
tons
from
down to go San Diego.
yeah,
Thousand Oaks
over
to
the
San Diego.
years, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Thousand Oaks to San Diego is a 4 hour to 6 hour endeavor.
But
I
Chris,
will
if
push
I
it's
back.
didn't
like
drive up
it's
to
got
see you from Anaheim, it's because of the traffic. I'm not far away, and I still couldn't make it
Yeah,
that
you could
far.
see
So
me, but it would have taken like 4 hours to get here.
I know.
This is the same thing that happened in Portland. Portland, the University of Oregon is not in Portland. For some reason, they said, let's put the universities, the two major universities, outside of Portland. So Portland is structurally deficit with regards to that as well. And that's why, that you could argue that's been one of the things, one of a few things that's kept Portland from having any kind of a rocket ship tech economy, other than the few a few eggs. They had some massive, I think, what was it, WhatsApp and Instagram or in Portland or something ridiculous like that. But other than that, just, odd thing, the role of a local, university and research institution, it's really important. In fact, it reminds me of this story I saw on Facebook. The Stanford's AI group. There was somebody who did a social audio share. I'll see if I can try to bring in the Tech News Twitter account, um, where he's bringing up a really good point with regards to just how AI is evolving and how the big companies, the Googles, are the ones that are in the driver's seat, and the research institutions don't have the access to the data. They don't have access to what is needed to make the great strides that research institutions have done historically to contribute to tech innovation. It was a really great share. I'll try to see if I can bring it over to the Tech
I'm
News.
just going I'm just going to remind everyone of Idea Lab, which predated Y Combinator. Tech transfer in universities generally sucks butt. That is the thing that actually I
Yes.
think is the most limiting factor with universities. The ones that have figured out how to get the technology into the private sector, and the people like the professors that are doing it that don't have university time spans but have startup time spans, right? University professor time spans generally like in 4 years we'll have a good prototype or whatever, and you're like, what the hell, the whole market will be different then, what are you doing? So I mean, there's a big problem with tech transfer. You have to have also the, like, even if it's not technology, just general startups, you have to have a lot of the right things at the right time. It's a really sort of kismety thing, and having workers who are able to work in that particular space and are willing to take a risk on a startup, I mean, those two things together are hard enough to find. Plus getting a new technology or something that gives you an edge, and then being able to release it into the wild of the tech ecosystem, and then also having money from people who are willing to invest it in these risky ventures and understand how the angel community here is not awesome. It exists. It's not great. It's not like, a lot of them are always, they have what I call LA eyeball. They're like at a meeting with you, but constantly looking around to see if there's something better. This is totally different from New York, where it's like, all right, I'm in a meeting with you. What do you got? And if I like it, I'll buy it. If not, nope. But it's this constant meetings,
So
and people get fed up and leave.
So I will say that, perhaps, we need to stop using the city as the core construct for the success or failure of a company. I mean, the city is a really crappy model to base an entire company's longevity on. I think, like, to be honest, if you can't find angels in LA, can you imagine what it looks like in St. Louis or in Kansas City? But there are startups, or Atlanta, where companies are thriving right now. I think that at the end of the day, the whole world has completely changed, and I don't think. I think we're going to start seeing the development of companies that are location agnostic. That essentially you can come fully remote companies from the beginning, and they're gonna probably find a way to register somewhere in Africa or somewhere else, and get the tax haven status that you want, and then build everywhere. And how do you kind of think through that problem? That's going to be being built on a better infrastructure than a no offense than a city. Like, why would I worry about what universities are close by when you can hire from any university anywhere anyway, and if they can work from home, why does it even matter? And so I'm just trying to give a counterpoint, which is like, if you're limited by the fact that there's no funding locally, we have these and this is not towards you, Alexander. I'm just saying to any vendor, like, we have these magical devices that we built, called planes, and just get on one, and you can go to Silicon Valley, you can go to the East Coast. We have raised close to $0 from St. Louis, by design, and just go out there, go raise some money, and come back. No one's stopping you, and I can tell you that the funders don't give a shit if you're in Silicon Valley anymore. They really don't care. I've never been asked. In fact,
So
most of the funding people never asked where we were located, actually.
yeah,
If
and to
that is
Ganish's point, we are 100% remote. I have not met 100% of my team members that I'm co-founders with. I don't think about location. I think about talent. I find talent and I try to attract it. I try to bring it into the organization. I try to talk to them early to get them apprised of what we're doing. And when the time's ready, we strike and we bring people in at the right time.
So.
And
I'm going to ask
that's just
Tyler
how.
a tough question here. Tyler, do you think that we're still in a position where we should be building startup ecosystems around cities, or should we start building startup ecosystems around concepts?
The
Because that
mission. It's the mission. I
yeah,
was
I
going
don't
to
know.
say
I
that,
don't
but I
know
didn't mean.
because I'd like to hear, because Tyler, I know you've built around cities and communities, but are we past that now?
I think
Yeah,
we are.
I'm seeing that everywhere right now with accelerators bombarding us with like this and that theme, and it's happening already, I think.
That could happen, but you still need a location for, like a jurisdiction for tax and for the legal ramifications and all of that. And that, I think that's really why places like Ireland are places that people go to, as opposed to South Africa or other places where the government might not have stability, and investors want that.
Or even in the states like California, we are avoiding California as a domicile as much as humanly possible. So I'm the
Well, the tax
CEO.
rate there is just crazy, and
I'm the
then
CEO,
the
and my
corporate.
headquarters is going to be in Texas or Florida.
Yeah,
Probably Miami.
exactly, but and because of state tax, but the regular, like the federal tax rate is increasing as well. It's expected to go up another 7 to 10 points, and that pushes people out of America in general. It just doesn't make sense to have a company here when you can have one somewhere.
Okay, let's get
But
back
for
to.
the very, very nascent startup, one of the things that gets it going is chance, right? This is one of the things that Silicon Valley really built out well, that you could take like a spin class and your investor is just on the bike next to you, right? Like that sort of element of chance, that is based on location. The more people you have in your area that you can run into that would be a fit for your company in some manner. And I'm not raising funds, so I don't, whatever. I don't really care where I live is not based on that at all. But that is actually something that is really important, because most people don't come from these networks of huge wealth, right? If you come from a network of huge wealth, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're already an existing functional revenue generating company, it doesn't matter where you are either. But if you are a startup trying to figure out if you're going to be able to make this go, you're going to need a whole collection of things, and the city in your area is usually the best place to find it. You could be entirely remote. The
Including
problem with
investors, right?
Oh, investors can be anywhere, but investors close by, yes, totally. And like investors close by,
I
that's like, oh hey, I just met this guy, in my building, who was just talking about looking for something interesting to invest in. That is actually how many companies get funded. Or, they're like, hey, come to my bank. We've just got this new deal that, because, most companies don't get venture funding or angel funding. So they're saying like, hey, come down to my bank. I got a deal for you. Like I have a great connection at somebody who runs a fund right now, who calls me for, general, like, hey, is this a legit thing or whatever? But I met her because she was working at one of the big banks, and we just met like at a coffee shop, and we just ended up talking, and now we have this relationship. I have several like that where it's just like sort of incidentally, hey, you're here. So I still think that the location that you are really matters at that infancy stage, and then beyond that you go wherever you want. You see that in Philly there's a lot of startups, none of them stay, and that's because they've got all these great universities and there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of people who are interested in it, but in the end it doesn't really support startups overall, so people will leave. That's their problem with brain drain. But having that mix of just location where you can run into people is really, it's how a lot of companies that are huge now ended up getting started. And
So
that's the key, right? That's what Alexander said. It was the key part, the kismet. And also, if you think about it, once you become big, that's what Apple and Hewlett Packard, everyone does, is they move their accounting offshore. But the key thing is they still remain in that ecosystem because that's how it works. That's exactly how I happened. Like I went to a conference, met Esther Dyson, met two Danes, a Spaniard, and myself. We went into Hacker House and we created something that each of us couldn't have done in over a year, but we did it within 5 days, right? It's all happened in Silicon Valley. It's just the ecosystem is there.
Silicon Valley is Florence in the Renaissance.
See,
For decades, I've been Silicon Valley. You have to go to Silicon Valley. Has that changed over 3 decades? Yes, it has. The concept of trust is something I would throw into this discussion. The rise of our virtual connection, and look at us right now in Clubhouse. This is cultivating the
Please say it,
confidence that
David.
we have, the confidence that we have with say our other investor friends, But another key thing that has not been discussed, and Dr. Donish, you're a rock star, but you're rare. You've got an inclusive, diverse executive team. Holy cow, man! You raised
A
money.
surgeon, CEO.
So So I mean, well, but it's not just that. It's just like in terms of just a startup success story. You're building something beautiful, and you're awesome in terms of what you're pulling together to do something really impactful in so many ways. But it's just not the norm. I moved up here, so I've been on the West Coast, up and down the West Coast for the last 30 years. So I've been all over this issue with regards to Silicon Valley, Southern California, Portland, and Seattle. I'm in the Seattle area now. In Seattle area, you would think, oh shit, man, there's all kinds of money. Oh my God. But no, there's only a few VCs in town, so you always have to get Series B and Series C, whatever, out of town, pretty much. So raising the angel, picking up the angel thing, like you had said, in these weird little funky Silicon Valley or New York City kinds of conversations because you went out to lunch and you're sitting at a table next to another person, that is real. And I would just simply say, there's the proximity, and then to the degree that the trust in the Keiretsu angel network, how you have these distributed trust networks, how that can help cultivate not just the early stage, but a lot of the question is going to be the follow-on funding as well. So, in any case, there's just a few more thoughts to throw onto this
Okay,
multi.
we got to move on.
Yeah.
So the next article is that Facebook removes its brand from its social VR platform, formerly known as Facebook Horizon, renaming it Horizon Worlds, and also announces a $10 million creator fund to create more content in their metaverse, basically. And that's quite interesting that Facebook's removing their branding from their metaverse.
Yeah, I
Then,
tweeted out an article about that because the consensus is generally, so they wanted to buy Unity that does all the building, like they're the
yes.
ones that are like the great tools to build in VR universes,
Yeah.
and they couldn't. Like Unity said no, so they're like, well, screw you, Unity. We're gonna build our own tools, and so people use them, and the Facebook tools suck. Like they're like noticeably worse. So now they're doing this, and they won't accept any Unity stuff at all. They're like,
Yep.
we're building our own universe. We don't need you. And it's very, very like playground stomping off with the
Yep.
ball. I'm going home.
Yeah.
Tyler, the
I don't
world's
disagree.
shortest thing. Tyler, the world's shortest thing here. I have been in and out and listening to this with the startups. I don't know if Daria Isaacson still is in the channel, but she is the general director of Vinnova, which is a very, very powerful thing regarding startups in Sweden. I don't know if you know her.
The boss for Vinnova?
Yeah, Daria
Yeah.
Isaacson. She
I
was in
haven't.
the audience before, at least.
Oh, she was? Yeah. I have a lot of friends who work at Vinnova, but I think we tried to get Daria to speak at my event, or she tried to speak at my event, I should say. I don't remember. It's for some reason it didn't come together, but no, we don't know each other well. I'll put it that way.
Okay, she was or are in the channel. I can't see her right now, but just regarding the Swedish startup scene, it wouldn't have been. I can't think of any more suitable than you yourself, of course, to speak about this. You went on.
Yeah, Vinnova's interesting. Americans hold on to your hats. What happens? Vinnova intentionally is a government fund, essentially, to fund the things that the private investors, the VCs and angel investors, won't fund. There you go. That's when your country's got some money. The investors aren't investing in you? Come this way. And by the way, if there's a chance that an investor can or might fund you, then you don't qualify to even talk with us. We're specifically designed to fund the unfundable. That's the whole purpose of the fund.
How have they done, Tyler?
Huh?
That's called
How?
subsidy.
Oh, how have they done? They've not done very
Yeah, I
well.
mean, like, because they've done very well.
I
Interesting.
wouldn't say. They would say they've done well. I don't think they've done very well.
Because I
But
think the big question is like, is just like, to Cheryl's point about subsidies, is it just trying to keep people in the ecosystem, just hoping that maybe by keeping them in the ecosystem, working on their little projects, at some point they're going to give up and go into another company, that company as it grows, or,
I think
what's the
they
thought
would
process?
say there are some ideas that they would like to see happen that aren't fundable from the perspective of traditional investors, and then it becomes an awkward issue of, is it just not a fundable concept, which is what they want to fund, or is it this is an unfundable founder? It's a fundable, why didn't they get funding? And then Vinnova's charter mandate is sort of like, oh, we're here to provide funding to the ideas, the models that the traditional VCs won't fund. You can see where it gets a little gray as to
But
why
isn't
they
this like
don't.
university? But isn't this like university fundings as well, right? Because university fundings are like they actually become like the idea creation centers also for some of these later on VC funded projects. So government, if it doesn't get involved in these projects, oftentimes we don't get to see some of these things coming to fruition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so
So
early stage.
the notion that there are lots of great business opportunities that, like, just as an example, Sandhill passes on is rock solid, right? We about an hour ago you brought up a good point with regards to put what was it, employment for with women, professional women or something. Like, holy cow,
Moms, yeah.
yeah, with moms, but like, duh, there are a whole bunch of great business opportunities with founders that can totally hit the ground running and have a good chance of success, that are outside of the, and I'll just say, mindset of the quote unquote traditional VC as well. So the challenge is exactly what you're pointing to, Tyler, about like how are they drawing the line, and how are they identifying maybe the founders that are kind of higher risk, and what's their strategy? It's all portfolio strategy, but it's great what they're trying to do.
Okay, so
And
we've got to
that's why
move
the
on.
Mom Project is happening in Chicago. There's a venture capital fund called Long Jump, which is headed by a lot of underserved and African American venture capital folks. So it can happen outside of Silicon Valley. It's proof.
But I'm going to push back, Tyler, before we move on, which is they were also funded by Initialized Capital, which is the most Silicon Valley-ish concept ever, right? A former Reddit founder was involved with it. I mean, this is like as Silicon Valley as it gets. So I'd like to remind people that the funding can come from anywhere, and it doesn't have to be in the same city. I do agree that Long Jump is doing great work. I want to get rid of this like kind of weird narrative that Silicon Valley doesn't look at startups outside of Silicon Valley. It's just not freaking true. And just a last comment on that, the days of meeting your VC in a spin class are far behind. I have to just kind of get people level set it that there's so much money in the system that the entire scarcity equation has changed completely. So I do want to be thoughtful about that.
You just said a key word. There's money in the system, and that is something. All of this unfolds in chapters. So you're spot on a whole lot of what you just said. But this is kind of very. It's just more recent. Some of these things that are describing that you're using to describe the current window of capital availability.
Okay, so a developer says that Facebook has banned him for life and threatened to sue him after he made a tool to make it easy to kind of get off of Facebook. And Microsoft says Russia carried out 58% of the state-backed hacks in the past year, with 32% success rate, and which is up from about 20%. So they're getting more successful. China accounted for 8% of the dedicated state-backed hacks, and North Korea in between with about 20. And Vision Rare, the NFT marketplace we read about yesterday, where a fantasy startup investing where users can spend real money to buy fake shares in real startups through NFTs, has now shut down. They're going back to the drawing board after receiving quite a bit of criticism.
Issues,
Cancel
right?
the Ferrari.
Okay, that takes us to that YouTube says we'll be making. Okay, that's the big headlines of the day. Now we get into the tweets. I have a hard stop at the top of the hour in 25 minutes, and we should be able to do it. So we've got Sudha Mini Kumar sends in this one from the Hindustan Times that an online fantasy mobile games. So online fantasy mobile games, which is a huge category of games. Games that are mobile and online, that's a lot of games, but are fantasy based. Still, a shit ton of games. Online fantasy mobile games are now banned in the Indian state of Karnataka. Fantasy mobile games are now banned in Karnataka following the latest implementation of a new law in effect from Tuesday. The question is why? Why is one of the Indian states banning games? After the state of Karnataka implemented a new law on Tuesday, access to fantasy mobile games have been restricted, and the Mobile Premier League was among the first few services that began blocking access to users on Wednesday. The law, which came into effect on late Tuesday, bans online games involving betting and wagering and any act of risking money or otherwise on the unknown result of an event, including on a game of skill. And Karnataka is the latest Indian state that has banned such online games after two other Indian states. And Tamil Nadu had also imposed such bans, but its bill was struck down by its high court. Okay, next up is also from Sunamini, and the headline says how Google wants to use AI in traffic lights to reduce pollution. So why don't we start making the city a little smarter by Google can share the real-time traffic data from Waze, where they know essentially where nearly every car is in real time, and share that data in real time with the city so that they can have intelligent streetlights to more effectively let the cars move around the cities. You could save a ton, literally tons, lots of tons, hundreds of tons, thousands of tons of CO2 if you had more intelligent streetlights. But that means they need access to the data of the cars in real time.
I just have a question about Waze. If they really know where all the cars are and like that's how they're generating their data, I don't know if this is even possible. Can they be used for like Amber Alert stuff? Like, do they know that well of what cars are where, or can they find particular cars?
I don't
The
know.
automatic license plate reader systems will evolve, and I wish Charles was here because he would give us more insight into that. But I believe that that's going to be the approach down the line. Is that a lot of these apps will have ALPRs built into them, and then quickly feed that data back into those traffic services.
What about OnStar? I mean, isn't that what's embedded into every car that was manufactured after 2015?
Just GM.
So Mukesh
One of the
Ambani, yes?
one of the things here with working with traffic lights and traffic flows, this is actually fluid dynamics. If you want to learn how to drive in a busy city with the least impact, there's actually quite a good paper. I will find it and post it on my Twitter account. The thing is here that the traffic lights, they are based on time and on the ordinary flow, but they can't handle variations. But because you get this rubber banding effect when you comes in Sweden. We drive 110 kilometers per hour on the motorway, but when you come to a city, you go down to first 80, 70, and then 50. And this gives a rubber banding effect each time you have an intersection or a roundabout on these large roads. And the thing is that these can be countered by having people driving in a slight milder matter. And the thing is that if you have AIs that works with the traffic lights, you could probably stop traffic congestion around crossing roads totally, I guess, but you will make it a lot milder. You won't come to a traffic light that just has entered the time of, oh, it should be red in north-south direction, because that's what my time say. It has nothing to do with the fluid dynamics. So I look forward to have AIs actually doing this, and this can also be used to actually slow down traffic into schools and make the traffic congestions on spots where you don't want people to drive. You are done speaking.
And Johan, sorry to jump in so fast. You're absolutely right. My grandfather was a public works inspector, so I've understood traffic since before I could walk. And what I do is called the slow roll. Once I see red lights, I actually deliberately slow down, and I play this game where my goal is to not hit my brakes by the time the traffic in front of me clears. And when you run into these drivers that know this tactic, you're very happy because you actually flow faster than the rest of traffic. And that's the technique you need to do.
That's exactly the technology behind and the math that are described in this paper I'm sitting here looking for. Because the thing is that if you see a traffic congestion a kilometer away, if you, instead of running all the way to the queue and stop like all the other ones, if you start to decelerate and go slower and slower and slower, the rubber banding will be a lot less painful. And the thing is, it will dissolve like sand in water. That was a bad one. Sorry for that.
No, that's perfect. No, that's perfect because everything has what's called a settling velocity, meaning things can float as long as the velocity underneath it is going a certain speed. And that's exactly what we're doing when we drive. There's a settling velocity on a freeway that we end up stopping because we jam as fast as we can till the person in front of us, and then we hit the brakes. So when I start the slow roll, I look behind me real quick because the person behind me is going to say, what the hell? This guy just started slowing down for no reason. And it's not like obvious. And they kind of look at me. And when they know that I'm slow rolling, they actually start slow rolling too. And then the rest of that lane just gets really good.
Okay, next up, Mukesh Ambani, the big guy in India, is gonna open 7-Elevens in India. So, which are huge in other parts of Asia, Japan and Thailand, very notably. And now he's going to go big on 7-Elevens in India, which doesn't have 7-Elevens. So they're going to start in Mumbai. And I think it makes a lot of sense in a post-COVID world with all of the things that 7-Elevens are doing in Thailand. They're killing it. They are absolutely killing it due to COVID. They've become they were critically important before COVID. They're even more critically important after COVID as the kind of central focus of deliveries and all kinds of things, paying bills and everything. That 7-Eleven becomes the heart of every community. But if it'll work the same way in India, I guess time will tell. But it has a lot of interesting tech implications. The next one is from Poppy from The Guardian, and the headline says, "Dystopian World, Singapore patrol robots stoke fears of surveillance state." And we read about these robots about a month ago, did we not, Cheryl?
Yes.
And now I guess they're scaring people, according to The Guardian. Trial of robots to police undesirable behavior such as smoking and breaching social distancing rules. Singapore has trialed patrol robots that blast warnings at people engaging in undesirable social behavior. I would love to see a video of that. Adding to an arsenal of surveillance technology in the tightly controlled city-state that is fueling privacy concerns. From vast numbers of CCTV cameras to trials of lampposts kitted out with facial recognition technologies, Singapore is seeing an explosion of tools to track its inhabitants. That includes a 3-week trial in September in which 2 robots were deployed to patrol a housing estate and a shopping center. Officials have long pushed a vision of a hyper-efficient, tech-driven, smart nation, but activists say privacy is being sacrificed and people have little control over what happens to their data. Singapore is frequently criticized for curbing civil liberties, and people are accustomed to tight controls, but there is still growing unease at intrusive tech. The government's
What's the news source? The source of this news?
The Guardian.
Oh.
The government's latest surveillance devices are robots on wheels with 7 cameras that issue warnings to the public and detect undesirable social behavior. This includes smoking and improperly parked bicycles and breaching coronavirus social distancing rules. During a recent patrol, one of the robots wove its way through a housing estate and stopped in front of a group of elderly residents watching a chess match. Please keep 1 meter distancing. Please keep to 5 persons per group, a robot voice blared out as a camera on top of the machine trained its gaze on them. Franny Tiao, a 34-year-old research assistant, was walking through the mall during a recent robot patrol trial. It reminds me of RoboCop, she said. It brings to mind a dystopian world of robots. I'm just a bit hesitant about that kind of a concept. Digital rights activists said the devices were the latest way Singaporeans were being watched. It all contributes to the sense people need to watch what they say and what they do in Singapore to a far greater extent than they would in other countries, she told AFP, Agence France Presse. But the government defended its use of robots, saying they were not being used to identify or take action against offenders during the tech's trial and were needed to address a labor crunch as the population ages. The workforce is actually shrinking, said Ong Ka Hing from the government agency that developed the robots, adding they could help reduce the number of officers needed for foot patrols. So, the island of about 5 million people has 90,000 police cameras, a number set to double by 2030, and facial recognition technology, which helps authorities pick out faces in a crowd, may be installed on lampposts across the city. There was a rare public backlash this year when authorities admitted coronavirus contact tracing data collected by an official system had been accessed by the police. The government later passed legislation to limit its use, but critics say the city-state's laws generally put few limitations on government surveillance, and Singaporeans have little control over what happens to the data collected. There are no privacy law constraints on what the government can or cannot do, said a privacy lawyer from Singapore who is now based in Germany. End of article. So people don't like the robots, but maybe because it's blurting out stuff they don't want to be hearing. Maybe if it said, "Hey, good morning, citizen," and, in more kind of polite robot demeanor, maybe people would warm up to these cold robots. And they, by the way, the design of the robot, let me tweet out the article so you can see what they look like. They don't look like the friendliest things either. So again, if you could get them to look, like a pony,
More friendly, right?
a unicorn perhaps.
Yeah, maybe look
Then
like Xiao Ding Dang. You know Doraemon?
Doraemon, there we go. Let's make Doraemon robots. Then people would be jumping to
Tyler,
take selfies with them.
do you remember that scene in Demolition Man when Sylvester Stallone first comes out of cryo, whatever, and he starts getting the demerits, and they come out of a little seashell if he says a profanity, like you violated the social code?
Yes.
I always tell my husband, everything goes back to Demolition Man someday. Everything's going to be watched and monitored, and every restaurant's going to be a Taco Bell.
So Aaron just DM'd me a video of the robot active in Singapore. So I'm going to tweet this out so you can see this thing strolling around. And it's very intimidating looking, and you can see the looks on people's faces as this thing goes
Jesus.
by. Copy link to tweet. Here we go. I'm going to tweet out the link to this video that Aaron found, and you can see this guy sitting on a bench as this thing strolls by, and he looks uncomfortable. And I think I would be too. This thing looks very intimidating.
They should model it after the LAPD. They'll have no problem.
Okay, so the next one is from Poppy from Yahoo Finance. It says, don't rule out an energy crisis, according to Goldman Sachs. Goldman is out with a warning that it could get worse before it gets better in the energy sector. When you head into winter with a critically low inventories, it has the potential to be a crisis, says Goldman Sachs head of energy research. It would take a cold winter to really face the risk of gas. It would take a cold winter to really face the risk of gas shortages. We're not at that point of blackouts in the U.S. We are trying to manage the winter risk. Now, of course, given the risks of weather uncertainty, we're going to see extreme volatility. Okay, next up is from a Medium post. In the headline says, if you want to imagine a post-COVID future, look to Denmark. COVID restrictions may feel permanent. Denmark's experience shows they don't need to be. And I think it's just a blog post highlighting the fact that Denmark has removed all COVID restrictions of any kind. And by the way, I believe Norway's now done the same, which I think Ellen can give us the update on that. Oh, she was on stage for most of today. Anyway, the next one says Brazil is facing years-long drought pushes Brazil to the brink. The country's worst drought in nearly a century is choking commerce, threatening ecosystems, and diminishing hydroelectric power generation. So just tweeted that out if you want to read that. And this one's related from Bloomberg. Bloomberg says global energy crisis comes to drought-stricken South America. So it isn't just Brazil, it's South America. The energy crisis sweeping the globe is about to hit South America, where a historic drought has the region desperate to replace a collapse in hydroelectric energy, because you can't make hydroelectric energy unless there's waters coming through the dams. And there's
water everywhere.
If you don't got water, you don't got power.
You got clouds.
The next one is from the Wall Street Journal. While thousands of people crowded outside the main gates of Kabul airport seeking to escape Afghanistan, the CIA opened a back door, a private secret entrance 2 miles away, where they had a tunnel into the airport that the Taliban didn't know about, because the Taliban had totally circled the airport. So they actually were even though they couldn't control the gate. America had controlled one of the gates. The Taliban entirely circulated around the airport, controlling everyone who could get to the airport, because they were trying to stop people from leaving Afghanistan. So the U.S. had a secret tunnel that went around their circle of the airport that came up above ground 2 miles away. Nicknamed Glory Gate, the back entrance was hidden from the Taliban and used to evacuate embassy staff and others. Next up is, we covered the Truecaller one. We covered Gavin Newsom. Apple opens its first U.S. Developer Academy, where students learn to create apps. The goal is to prepare graduates of diverse backgrounds for potential jobs in the thriving iOS app economy. There you go. And the next one is from Ame, that shit's about to go down. Tether's elusive CEO has vanished from Twitter. The Twitter account belonging to Tether's CEO was deleted today following a controversy over the USDT stablecoin. That could be very interesting tomorrow. We will see. From the Times of India, the government plans to make drones $18 to $20 billion industry by 2030, paving the way for drones to usher in a paradigm shift in India. Just like mobile phones and internet did some years ago, the government is looking at making this a $18 to $20 billion industry by 2030. Vaccine delivery by drones and mapping land parcels to give ownership titles have started in the country. And the next one's from Craig Nielsen from the Washington Post, that Dubai's ruler used Pegasus spyware to hack the Princess of Dubai. A UK court has ruled. And Poppy sends in this one from MIT, that democratizing synthetic biology. City science researcher Andreas Rico reflects on his time participating in this past year's How to Grow Almost Anything class at MIT. So I just tweeted that one out for those who want to dig into that one. And BB sends in this one from Reuters, that Netflix is going to edit Squid Game, their fantastic, huge new series. They're going to edit Squid Game phone number after a woman inundated with calls. A South Korean woman who was deluged with thousands of prank calls and text messages after her phone number was highlighted as a key plot point in the Netflix series. So this is why in every Hollywood movie we use 555-1212 as the phone number for every. You can't use real phone numbers. And Gizmodo's headline says how WhatsApp swallowed half the world. And it's about how WhatsApp got very popular by doing partnerships with the telephone companies. And Android 12 lets enterprise administrators dedicate cell connectivity to work profile apps, limit USB for just charging, and more. And this is very, very clever shit that the Android's doing here. With Android 12 going open source on Monday, Google today detailed what's new in the iOS for enterprise admins and end users about privacy controls, and impose more measures to secure corporate data. This is super clever. This will make corporates use Android over iPhones, I believe. One particularly interesting capability lets IT admins slice their 5G network and dedicate connectivity to all apps on a fully managed device. This proprietary cell service can also be limited to work profile apps, with enterprises in partnership with carriers having wider control over quality of service and security of work data. Meanwhile, administrators can limit the USB-C port on company-owned devices so that only charging works and nothing else, no data. This reduces the risk of USB-backed attacks, though not all devices support the ability to disable USB data signaling. Companies can similarly restrict what input methods are available in personal profiles. In requiring people to use the default input, there's a reduced risk of a rogue keyboard that could capture data on the device. This is totally brilliant. They basically figured out all of the ways that corporate devices get hacked and have made it possible for the IT administrator to neutralize those threats. It's brilliant, totally brilliant. I'm amazed it
There
took
are
us.
others
Yeah.
that wouldn't. I mean, state actors can do a
Yeah.
lot more than your average one. But you close as many holes as you can, and this
Yeah.
seems like a positive step.
And a
Yep.
lot of the USB cables are like that. If you buy really cheap gear, they don't have the data cables because the data cable is double the cost of the cable. So it's
Alrighty.
just power USB.
Well, this takes us to the top of the hour. We have 24 hours of tweets to go. It's the end of Friday, but we meet on Saturday to go through all the tweets we've not gone through. So we'll have the 24 hours of tweets that we have yet to go through today, and a whole new 24 hours of tweets that will be in the Twitter feed before we meet tomorrow. So we'll have 48 hours of tweets as we normally do as we go into our special Saturday edition. So I hope you join us, and I hope you have a wonderful start to your weekend.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you next time.
Everybody,
Thanks, Connor.
Tyler.
All
Thank
right,
you.
everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks, Tyler.
Tyler.
Bye, guys.